Han Sen followed Li Duo through Night Ring 12th Street. They checked out a few places, with many of them being murder scenes. Han Sen used his Dongxian aura to scan each area for details. The strangest thing was that the only traces Han Sen picked up had been left by night ghosts. He couldn't see any sign of there being any other creatures around. Strange. Normally, any creature that passes through would leave behind a substance to trace. There cannot be nothing. Unless the murderer can control its physical form to the molecular level, this suggests the murderer might very well be a night ghost. There is no evidence of any other being around here. After all, Han Sen thought. Did you find anything? Li Duo couldn't help but ask. She had already taken Han Sen to several locations. No, Han Sen shook his head. I told you that we need the sky to sort this out. We'll need your sky people to come and check out these crime scenes, Li Duo said. He is on his way. I'm just trying to do some of my own investigating. Take me someplace else, so I can report to Brother Sky, Han Sen said seriously. Hearing that, Li Duo led Han Sen to another crime scene. Are there any other intelligent creatures around this planet? Han Sen asked as they walked. The universe was comprised of a variety of races. It was rare to see one race govern more than their own small area. Han Sen had been in Night Ring 12th Street for a while now, and all he had seen living there were night ghosts. The environment of this planet is special. Most races couldn't fathom living here, Li Duo said. There aren't any other races living in Night Ring 12th Street? Han Sen asked. Li Duo thought and then said, there are a few on the planet, but they aren't in Night Ring 12th Street. Oh, what does that mean?
Han Sen log konfused.
Li Duo hesitated for a moment, but then said, night ghosts love eating meat. But there aren't many creatures on planet Night Ghost. So, the meat is imported from another planet. Over the last century, we have been cooperating with the tourists. They have a base not far outside of Night Ring 12th Street. If you want to find a foreigner, they would be it. I recall that the tourists belong to the demon. Why don't you buy food from Sky Palace, anyway? Why rely on the tourists? Han Sen asked after a moment. We have no choice. The food we require is special. Normal races cannot satisfy our needs, and the tourists are the only ones who can supply what we need. The Sky Palace leader has approved our ties, Li Duo said. Where is their base now? Han Sen thought he'd have to go and take a look. The tourists were dangerous, and they very well could have been the ones doing this. It cannot be them, Li Duo said immediately. Why? Han Sen was surprised by her certainty. We have a contract. They only live in their base, and they do not venture beyond it. And furthermore, there are cameras all around their base. If they left their zone, they would be discovered. If they entered Night Ring 12th, they'd be found out because they look so different. After a while, Li Duo resumed talking. She said, the leader of that base is Marquis Khan. He is of the demon. He is a noble gentleman, too. He wouldn't be the one doing this. It's okay. I am just going to go scope it out on behalf of my brother. It's so I can have answers for him if he asks me about them. Han Sen smiled while he spoke. He followed Li Duo out of Night Ring 12th Street. They were going to the tourist base. Han Sen was thinking, the demon are the leaders of the tourists. I guess it isn't too strange for a demon to be here, but still, the demon might have motive. Is it just a coincidence? When they reached the tourist base, he realized that it was actually like a space station. The interior was wholly sealed. It looks like they can't cope with the environment here. They needed to create a place that was suitable for them to live. Otherwise, they could not stay here for very long. After Han Sen entered, he felt that it was a far more comfortable environment for a human as well. Miss Li Duo, why are you here? Two tourist guards smiled. It looked as if she was well known around there. Han Sen was not surprised. He hadn't thought that an ordinary night ghost would try to prohibit his passage. She must have been sent by Sleepless Duke, but her exact identity was still unknown to him. But through their conversation, Han Sen had quickly realized that Li Duo was Sleepless Duke's daughter.
Miss Li Duo.
Han Sen and Li Duo led to a meeting room, and shortly after, a demon wearing a black suit entered. He looked very refined, and he said hello to Li Duo. Li Duo stood up and said, Marquis Khan, I am sorry to bother you. Han Sen was checking out Marquis Khan. He was an attractive demon. His face was handsome and memorable. Something about him gave Han Sen the sense he was dangerous, though. It was the same feeling Han Sen got when he encountered Sharon. A small tourist base has a demon leader? This whole thing is getting interesting. Han Sen was sizing up Khan with interest. He had been focusing on practicing Geno arts lately, and he had only learned a little bit of suppress evil. He had only come here because he had been ordered to. But now Han Sen had an interest in the affair. He didn't think the mission was as bad as he initially believed it to be. Marquis Khan, this is an assistant of Sky Palace. He is merely here to look around. This is just a normal investigation. When Marquis Khan showed up, Li Duo could barely keep her eyes off him. Anyone could tell Li Duo liked him very much.
I'm Khan.
It is nice to meet you, Mr. Han. Khan looked at Han Sen and smiled. Then, he extended his hand. You know him? Li Duo was surprised. She didn't say Han Sen's name, and she hadn't introduced him. If Khan knew his surname, then he was already familiar with Han Sen. Han Sen from Sky Palace. I'm afraid the whole world knows who he is, Marquis Khan said. Li Duo looked at Han Sen with confusion. Marquis Khan, can you answer a few questions? Han Sen shook his hand and smiled. Of course, but before that, I hope you can come take a look at something. Murders like those in your investigation have occurred here, too, Khan said. In the base, Han Sen was led to 2 puddles of black water. It was the same manner of death that the others had died. When Han Sen scanned the area, he could only detect traces of the tourists and Khan. There were also some night ghost substances, but there was nothing beyond that. After checking all the cameras, they could not locate the murderer. Those 2 tourist officers had died in their rooms. From the security feeds, no one else had been seen entering the rooms. And the locked doors showed no signs of forced entry until they were broken down when rescuers had entered to search for the missing tourists. There were no other creatures around. Nothing else had shown up. Just as with the other victims, there were no clues to be found. Han Sen was not a detective, and he planned on letting Lone Bamboo be the one to handle this matter. Before Han Sen took his leave, he turned back to Khan. Marquis Khan, may I ask why you are here? Khan's expression did not change, and he calmly said, because the night ghosts ordered something quite expensive. Because of that, I delivered the goods myself. I didn't expect things like this would transpire after my arrival. May I know what these expensive goods are? Han Sen asked. I am sorry, but we are committed to the privacy of our customers. If you would like to know what the items are, you will have to speak with Sleepless Duke, Khan said. Han Sen nodded, and he readied himself to leave. After walking 2 steps, he stepped back. Have those products been delivered? Yes, Khan affirmed. Thanks. Han Sen then left the tourist base. Are you famous? Li Duo asked Han Sen as they walked back. Khan knew who Han Sen was, and he had been quite polite to him. It surprised her. The only other person who received such deference from Khan was Sleepless Duke herself, from what Li Duo could recall. But when Li Duo thought about the way Khan had treated Han Sen, it was more like Khan was simply wary of him. Not really. It's just because I killed a demon that they focus on me. They kind of hate me.
Han Sen låg head.
I see. Li Duo was surprised. Han Sen looked at Li Duo and randomly said, It looks like you're close with Khan.
Li Duo blusha.
Not very close. He and my mother conduct trade negotiations in Night Ring 12th Street, and he has beaten a few of our strongest warriors in an event. It's how I recognize him. What did your mother buy that required a Marquis demon to deliver it? Han Sen asked. I don't know. Li Duo shook her head. Han Sen asked a few other questions, then returned to the Duke Manor with Bauer to look for Lone Bamboo. When Han Sen tracked down Lone Bamboo's room, he found the man taking a nap. What did you find? Han Sen asked. There is a problem with Sleepless Duke, Lone Bamboo said with certainty, opening his eyes. What problem? Han Sen quickly asked. I do not know, but I can tell she is hiding something. With my power, I can't uncover whatever she is refusing to reveal, Lone Bamboo said coldly. Han Sen told Lone Bamboo what he had found, and Lone Bamboo sighed. As far as I can tell, night ghosts need sustenance to survive. But they only eat fresh food. They don't eat anything that has been dead for more than a day. The tourists bring them living stock. Because of the Sky Palace ruling, the living creatures need to be killed before reaching Night Ring 12th Street. Nothing alive can go there. Why does that matter?
Han Sen sighed.
Night ghost is a disturbing race that dines on flesh, but as for why they must eat goods that are alive, it's not as simple as filling their stomachs. They don't just eat meat. They consume something we don't quite understand. The best comparison we can make is that they eat the souls of their prey. Souls? Han Sen was surprised. So far, no one had proved souls actually existed. It's just a description. When night ghosts eat, they can absorb a mysterious substance. It boosts their levels, and especially the strength of their wills. There was a night ghost duke that had a will that was stronger than a king class, Lone Bamboo said. Han Sen was surprised, and he said, even better than a king class? Was it deified or half-deified? It should have been a half-deified. Lone Bamboo continued to say, but evolving that way is like cheating. Their minds grow confused, and their own souls might merge with the consumed creatures. They go crazy and become filled with bloodlust. They can even kill their own families. So, Sky Palace forbids them from eating creatures that are alive. You think Khan gave something alive to Sleepless Duke? Han Sen now understood his line of thinking. Lone Bamboo nodded and said, it's just a guess. Sky Palace keeps a keen eye on things here, though. They check all creatures that are ferried to Night Ring 12th Street. Things have run smoothly for years, but maybe the guard slipped up, and now someone is taking advantage of things. Like you said, Khan's presence seems suspicious. What item delivery might require the supervision of a demon? This is all possible, but why would the demon agree to this? Do you think this is all connected to the murders on Planet Night Ghost?
Han Sen asket kvietlu.
I'm not sure, but we will have to ask her, Lone Bamboo said coldly. Will she admit to this? Even if she was involved, Han Sen didn't think it was likely that she'd just volunteer that information. She has no choice, Lone Bamboo replied calmly. Han Sen slumped his shoulders. He wasn't good at this sort of thing, so he was just going to follow Lone Bamboo's lead. Lone Bamboo wanted to find her right away, but the people of Duke Manor told him she was out. It took another 2 hours before they had the chance to see her again. Mr. Lone Bamboo, I've heard that you were in a rush to find me. What is the matter? Sleepless Duke asked Lone Bamboo. Khan delivered some special goods to you. I would like to know what they are. Lone Bamboo told her directly. Sleepless Duke sighed and said, I suppose there is no use hiding anything. The goods Khan gave me were a bunch of living creatures. Why would you do that? Lone Bamboo asked. You should both know that after we eat living creatures, our mental fortitude may develop problems, Sleepless Duke said tiredly. Eating them is indeed a very dangerous thing for us to do. Then why are you buying them? Han Sen asked. It is simple. If I don't eat living creatures, then I will never improve. We level up faster that way. Without eating living creatures, our gain of power is slow. I am a duke, and if I don't eat living creatures, I will not become a king. This is our goal, is it not? No matter how much treasure I am given, I will never level up. Eating living creatures is the only way to accomplish this. Sleepless Duke spoke with a mournful voice. Are you or one of the creatures responsible for the murders? Lone Bamboo frowned. One of the living ones escaped. I was afraid of Sky Palace finding out, and so I did not report it. Sleepless Duke gave a wry smile. I never thought things would come to this. I thought that since this was taking place on Planet Night Ghost, I could find the foe quickly and kill it. But I have failed to find it, and as a result, so many innocents have lost their lives. I cannot hide this any longer. What is the creature that escaped you? Han Sen asked Sleepless Duke. I do not know. Sleepless Duke shook her head. Han Sen's voice grew hard. How could you not know? You were the buyer. How can you not know what you were buying? Sleepless Duke's expression was bitter now. I needed high-level creatures. I couldn't go for something too big, as I would be found out. There weren't many that were suitable for purchase, so my requirements weren't strict. I asked for anything that was a duke. I checked the receipt, and one of them said it was a crystallizer. It did look like a crystallizer, but how could it be that powerful? Crystallizer? Han Sen frowned. He did not expect this would have something to do with a crystallizer. Sleepless Duke went on to say, a crystallizer cannot escape from its cage and kill so many night ghosts without leaving a trail. I think it must have been a race that merely looked like a crystallizer. I tried to confirm this with Khan, but he told me it was just a Duke crystallizer, and that he did not know anything further. Sleepless Duke started to say something more, then hesitated. Say it, Lone Bamboo commanded. Sleepless Duke hesitated again, but she went on to say, it is rare to see a crystallizer in the Geno universe. I don't know too much about them. I have searched for information about them after the murders began, but there is little to learn. One strange thing, however, is that crystallizer blood should be red. The crystallizer that was sent here, however, had blue blood. Blue blood?
Han Sen jumped.
Yes, blue blood. It was injured when it was sent here, and it was bleeding. It looked as if it had been badly damaged, and that was why I planned on eating it first. So, I removed the spell that had been put on him, and I locked him in a room. But when I was ready to eat and went there to see him, he was gone. Nothing in the room was damaged or out of place. It was as if he had just vanished. Take us there, Han Sen said. The blue blood crystallizer sounded an awful lot like a Blood Legion member. They looked just like crystallizers, so anyone in the Geno universe would assume that's what they were. And furthermore, blue blood was exclusive to members of Blood Legion. Crystallizers and humans were supposed to have red blood. Sleepless Duke brought Han Sen and Lone Bamboo to the prison cell. Han Sen used his Dongxian aura, but he couldn't catch the trace of anyone other than Sleepless Duke. You really locked him in here? Han Sen looked at Sleepless Duke. An injured creature must have left a substance behind, and it would at least be dripping blood. Yes, he left some blood behind, but I cleaned it up. Sleepless Duke brought out a box and showed it to Han Sen and Lone Bamboo. Lone Bamboo, when seeing it, frowned. That is its blood?
Han Senes Ejebrofs Roes.
It was just a blue crystal in a box, and the crystal looked similar to Han Sen's own crystal blood. I feel strange, knowing that its blood turned to crystal. They are crystallizers, but they aren't supposed to have this ability. It's what has got me thinking that he isn't actually a crystallizer, Sleepless Duke said. Han Sen picked up the blue crystal from the box. He knew that it was indeed a blue blood crystal, and just like his own blood, it left no molecules behind for him to detect. That was why he could not find a trace. It looks like the person Khan sent was from Blood Legion, Han Sen guessed to himself. Gentlemen, what I have told you is the truth. If you want to punish someone, punish me. But this has nothing to do with my people. Please help them and find the creature responsible. It cannot be allowed to kill more night ghosts, Sleepless Duke begged. You're coming with us to talk to Khan. We have to find out where he got that crystallizer Duke from. If we find out who he is, we will be able to take action, Han Sen said to Sleepless Duke. Okay, I will follow you. Sleepless Duke really was eager to cooperate. Han Sen went back to the tourist base, but when they reached it, the gate had already been smashed open. They ran in, and they found black water and scattered bits of armor all over the place. The armor belonged to the tourists. They ran in and soon noticed that not a single tourist had survived the assault. Pang! A noise echoed out of a nearby hallway. What is that place? Han Sen asked Sleepless Duke. That is their company's warehouse, Sleepless Duke said. The three ventured toward it. After a few turns, they did indeed reach a very large warehouse. Outside it, Khan was fighting a human-looking man. Please give me a hand taking down this asterisk shoal. He is the one that slew my workers, and many night ghosts as well, Khan called out when he saw Han Sen and the others coming. He looked joyous in relief. We have finally found it. Sleepless Duke shouted happily as she ran to join the fight. Please help us. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo looked at each other, then moved forward to help. The man glowed blue as he fought. He looked injured, but he was still more than a match for Khan, who was a Marquise demon. The man was impressive. When the three of them joined Khan, the fight became a 4-on-1. That imbalance of power should have ended the fight immediately, but although they managed to suppress the man, they were unable to kill him. Han Sen could confirm right away that the man was a member of Blood Legion. He was very much like God's retribution, and the presence he had was something only members of Blood Legion tended to carry. The man roared like a beast. His fist punched the knife out of Khan's hand. And then, another fist came to knock Sleepless Duke's claws away. He could fight two people at once, and that meant he was really strong. Khan used sky demon powers, and even so, the man was able to shrug off the attacks that came crashing against his body. Sleepless Duke was a night ghost duke, but not even she was able to claim an advantage over that man. As the man used his fists to attack Khan and Sleepless Duke, Lone Bamboo's sword swept toward the man's chest. He shouldn't have been able to block Lone Bamboo's simple, albeit powerful attack. The man exploded with blue light, though. He stumbled back a bit, losing his balance. It also meant he dodged Lone Bamboo's sword. But Han Sen, who had silently moved behind the man, went at the man's throat with ghost teeth knife. Khan and Sleepless Duke rushed forward, with knives and claws respectively, to attack the man.
Young.
There was a loud noise, as Han Sen grabbed the man and threw him at Lone Bamboo. He had to use his own knife to repel Khan and Sleepless Duke's incoming strikes, though. Han Sen's legs dug a pair of trenches into the ground as he was knocked back 10 meters. But now, Lone Bamboo's sword was at the man's throat, not letting him move. Han Sen, what are you doing? He killed so many of our people. He should die. Sleepless Duke looked incredibly angry. She flared up with a black, demonic fire. With her claws, she came in to attack the man. Han Sen flapped his dragon wings and teleported in front of her. He used tooth for a tooth, slashing across her claw air to deflect her strike. Han Sen's body fell back, and Sleepless Duke flapped her wings. She looked like a demon as she screeched, Han Sen, is it because you are of the same race that you protect him? Our people cannot die in vain, no matter what. Yes, our workers cannot have died in vain, either. He must pay. Khan threw a slash towards the man in Lone Bamboo's grip. Lone Bamboo, keep him alive. Han Sen lifted Ghost Teeth Knife and sprang towards Sleepless Duke. He was pushed back. Sleepless Duke was much stronger than Han Sen, and Han Sen knew he couldn't beat her in a direct fight. Lone Bamboo's sword was still at the man's throat. He ignored the knife Khan was using and raised a finger to point at Khan. A swordlight swiftly shot toward the dead center of Khan's forehead. Lone Bamboo could not dodge the sky demon power that never missed. If Khan attacked that way, Lone Bamboo was sure to be hit. But also, Khan's head would get perforated at the same time. Khan frowned and changed his skill. He fought Lone Bamboo with his knife. But no one had an advantage. Khan couldn't commit to an attack without leaving an opening that Lone Bamboo could exploit. So, he had to change up the techniques he employed. You are Han Sen? The man under Lone Bamboo's sword did not look scared. He watched Han Sen fight Sleepless Duke. Han Sen was weaker than she was, but he had speed and break space flash. He could stop her from going after Lone Bamboo anytime he needed to.
IAM, Han Sen ansvarig.
The man immediately said, God's retribution has spoken much about you. You should know about where I come from. Spill the beans, Han Sen snapped. This was the last confirmation he needed that the man was from Blood Legion. I don't know what happened. When I was badly injured, the tourists brought me here. I had some power, so I broke out, but I was stuck in that warehouse. I do not know what they are saying or what has supposedly transpired, but I haven't left this place since they brought me here, the man said. Nonsense. Do you believe him, Lone Bamboo? Are the deaths of our many night ghosts all a fabrication? Are the deaths of the tourists all faked, too? Sleepless Duke shouted. Her attempts to attack the man never paused. Han Sen slashed towards Sleepless Duke to stop her from moving. He coldly said, Sleepless Duke, I assure you that he has never been to Night Ring 12th Street. He was never placed in your captivity. You are lying. What makes you so sure? You are merely protecting your kind, Sleepless Duke screamed, then threw another claw air at Han Sen like she was hurling a net. Han Sen flapped his dragon wings and disappeared. He reappeared next to Sleepless Duke and coldly said, Brother Lone Bamboo, take him away. Yes, Lone Bamboo agreed. He began pulling the man back, still fighting Khan as he went. Seeing Lone Bamboo dragging the man away, with Khan unable to stop him, Sleepless Duke screamed in rage. It was so loud that it reverberated from every corner of the base. None of you can leave. Sleepless Duke screamed at ear-shattering volume. Sleepless Duke, do you know what you are doing? Lone Bamboo ground out. Of course I know what I am doing. The night ghosts have been imprisoned by the sky for many years. We will no longer obey you. Sleepless Duke screamed. Many shadows were gathering in the sky. They were like black clouds, and they were all night ghosts. The night ghosts that appeared in the sky were different from the usual ones, however. They looked murderous, and the scariest thing about them was the fact that they were mostly marquis. And many of them were dukes, too. Lone Bamboo frowned. The night ghosts were only supposed to have one duke, and that was Sleepless Duke. If they now had so many, it meant that they must have all been eating living creatures to level up quickly. The whole base was infested with night ghosts. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo were trapped. If they wanted to escape, they would have to fight and kill their way through the host of night ghosts. But there were thousands of them, and there were more than 1,000 dukes. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo had only just become marquises, and they were carrying an injured man between them. It would not be easy for the three of them to escape. Han Sen looked up at the night ghosts that were looking down at them like hungry tigers. Then he turned to her, emotionlessly. Sleepless Duke, do you know what will happen if the night ghosts betray Sky Palace? We will go and join the demon, anyway. Sky Palace will not be able to do anything, Sleepless Duke snarled. It makes sense that Marquis Khan is here, then. It has always been your plot to betray Sky Palace. Han Sen looked at Khan next, and he asked, but I don't understand. If you were planning to join Demon, why bother getting us involved? Sleepless Duke grunted and said that it was merely an accident. We planned to use these living creatures to turn all our warriors into dukes. Then we'd have the strength to smash through Sky Palace's defenses. We did not expect one to run out and rouse the attention of the observation department. With the power you wield, you could have easily killed a wounded man. Han Sen looked at the man who was badly wounded. Khan and Sleepless Duke should have been able to defeat him. With the injuries he had sustained, there was no way he could have fought off so many night ghosts. Sleepless Duke did not answer, but the man laughed and said, I controlled the lives of those creatures. She wants me dead, but she doesn't want those other creatures to die. That is why I am still alive. I told you to give those creatures up, kill him, and go to the demon. If you had listened to me, none of this would have happened, Khan told Sleepless Duke. Without these creatures, my people would not be able to become dukes. God knows how many of our people would have been killed breaking through those defenses. I had no choice in this matter, Sleepless Duke said. So, you planned all this? All for us to be the ones that killed him? Now Han Sen knew the truth of the matter. Something like that. But I did not expect the two of you to come here together. Sleepless Duke coldly went on to say, but it does not matter now. Since it has come to this, we cannot fall back. You can all go to hell. After that, Sleepless Duke screamed. The horde of night ghosts flapped their wings like demons and came racing down to Han Sen. Lone Bamboo let the man go, thrusting the three of them into a horrendous battle. The power and speed of the night ghosts were terrifying in the dark. It was no wonder why they were good at fighting. They were high level, and they had strong wills. The Duke Night Ghosts were a serious threat. Bauer was sitting on Han Sen's shoulder, observing Han Sen's fighting with curiosity. Instead of participating in the battle, Khan merely watched Han Sen from afar. Han Sen, you are a powerful being to defeat Sharon. I would have liked the opportunity to kill you myself. I did not expect you would come here. That is disappointing. Disappointing? What? Han Sen flapped his dragon wings and teleported in front of Khan. Then, he slashed towards him.
Young.
Khan's demon knife came up to block. The impact sent them both wobbling back. Neither attack did anything, but Han Sen was immediately surrounded by night ghosts. It was a very dangerous position to be in. It is disappointing that you'll die here today, and I will be robbed of the chance of killing you myself in a one-on. It is a shame whenever people like you and Lone Bamboo have to die this way. Khan sighed. In that case, you won't be disappointed. We will fight, Han Sen said. It is a shame, but I do not see how you plan on surviving. The night ghosts are good in the dark. It wouldn't matter if you and Lone Bamboo had a clone army of yourselves. On planet Night Ghost, you would still be destroyed, Khan said. Maybe not. Han Sen teleported away from the attacks of the night ghosts. And then, he spoke to Sleepless Duke. Sleepless Duke, There is still time for you to reverse this mistake. The night ghosts can still be allowed to live. If you continue down this path, all of the night ghosts in this universe will be wiped out. Do you want your daughterly duo and the rest of your people to die with you? I would rather die than remain a prisoner. Whoever gets in the way of us becoming free will die, Sleepless Duke shrieked. She flapped her wings and came at Han Sen. Han Sen petrified his body and stomped the ground, unleashing a shockwave of petrification. But the night ghosts around him did not petrify.
This chockade Han Sen.
Do not waste your energy. The only thing that can defeat the night ghosts is light. Petrify won't work on them. Their bodies aren't made of flesh, so they won't be petrified. Han smiled. If the night ghosts weren't so excellent, the demons wouldn't have spent so much time trying to recruit them. Han Sen frowned. The night ghosts were harder to handle than he thought. Things were going badly for Lone Bamboo and the injured man. They were holding on, but they couldn't escape in their current condition. They would die the moment they became exhausted. Come to me. Han Sen shouted at Lone Bamboo and the man. Lone Bamboo heard that, and his jade sword began to shine. The night ghosts near Han Sen backed away. The man exploded with blue light as he came running towards Han Sen. Han Sen waved his ghost teeth knife. The night ghosts that he had cut suddenly found their wounds cracking and widening. Sleepless Duke screamed and leaped at Han Senator. Han Sen teleported away to evade her. The three of them stood together, back to back, as the night ghosts came at them from all sides. Ghost airs were everywhere. It looked as if they had gone on a trip to hell itself. Lone Bamboo and the man wanted to start killing their attackers in earnest, but Han Sen stopped them. A blue light came out of his body, covering the three of them. The blue light became a giant, translucent eggshell. It encased them. Powerful ghost airs were everywhere as countless ghost claws came against the translucent eggshell. The impacts made squeaky noises, and Han Sen could feel each blow as a sort of pressure. But when those ghost airs broke, the translucent shield was unmoved. It did not even vibrate. Let's see how many attacks you can block, Sleepless Duke shouted. The other night ghosts began to cackle, gathering up a force of ghost air. Han Sen had raised a single shield against an entire army. Sleepless Duke thought he must have a death wish. When the three defenders had been actively fighting, the dukes and marquises were unable to gather up power. There was too much danger that their attacks would hit other night ghosts, so they intentionally weakened their attacks. But now, the three of them had made themselves into an incredibly tempting target. The night ghosts gathered up all the power they had, then focused on a single part of the shield. Not even strong creatures could withstand the strength of what was coming. Sleepless Duke had a plan. She needed to take Han Sen and Lone Bamboo as hostages. If she did that, she'd have an even easier time getting through Sky Palace's defenses. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo were important to Sky Palace. They wouldn't be sacrificed easily. The roiling mass of ghost air covered the sky now, and it was trying to consume the blue light. It was like the world was about to be consumed. Boom! When the ghost air landed, the entire base was annihilated. The construct was practically vaporized. 1,000 dukes and 10,000 marquises were attacking simultaneously. The area was brought to ruin, and the power continued down into the ground, creating a substantial crater. Under a scary power such as that, even a duke would have been blown to bits. When the dust settled, Sleepless Duke and the night ghosts could only stare. Khan's eyes were full of surprise. A blue translucent shield sat on the ground, appearing unblemished. Han Sen and the other two stood inside, uninjured by the attack. It was hard to believe that such a frightening amount of power could descend upon that simple shield and leave it undamaged. Is that all the power the night ghosts have? Han Sen asked casually. Let's see how well you can block this, Sleepless Duke screamed. The night ghosts gathered up another enormous mass of ghost air. They became angry ghosts that descended on the blue shield. Countless ghost airs slammed repeatedly into the blue shield. Even the nearby mountains were shattered by these attacks. But the blue shield did not even shudder or shake. Even the ghost airs that could destroy mountains were reduced to a firework sparkle against it. Sleepless Duke kept on screaming. Thousands of night ghosts kept attacking from all angles, but still, they could not undo the blue shield. Han Sen floated in the shield, while Lone Bamboo had sat down for a bit of rest. The man was in the middle of healing himself. Sleepless Duke's face was white with fury, and she was unable to fathom what sort of treasure Han Sen had brought with him. It could block each and every attack that was thrown at it. Han Sen's treasure wouldn't actually cost him his power either. If it did, he would have reacted in some way when the night ghost attacked him. You guys can continue.
Han Sen loked en tireli unkoncerned.
It was as if nothing was going on. Han Sen stood up and stretched, and then he began walking up into the air. It looked as if he was going to walk off the planet, right into space. The blue shield around Han Sen was like a godlight. It continued to encase Han Sen, unwavering in the slightest. Kill him! Sleepless Duke's scream became a roar. Countless night ghosts tried to attack Han Sen, and ghost airs hit the blue shield continuously. Some night ghosts used knives, and some used claws or even hammers to attack. But even so, the attacks were still useless. They couldn't prevent Han Sen from walking off into space. The attacks against the blue shield were like nothing at all. They couldn't even make the shielding orb shake. Sleepless Duke had bared her teeth in a grimace as she tried her hardest to attack the blue shield. Her fingers started to bleed, but even so, she was still unable to bring it down. She felt scared, powerless, and most of all, she felt hopeless. She knew what would happen if Han Sen and Lone Bamboo were able to escape. It would be a disaster for the night ghosts. But they couldn't do anything against the blue shield. They were hopeless. Sleepless Duke, there is one more thing we can do. Khan's voice rang through Sleepless Duke's ears. Tell me, how can I kill them? Sleepless Duke turned to him frantically, looking like she was clutching a lifeline. Khan waved his hand, and a spear with a red pattern appeared in his palm. Khan threw it to Sleepless Duke and said, "This is a treasure of a king-class demon. It is called a blood demon spear. With its power, it should be able to break Han Sen's shield." Sleepless Duke frowned. We don't have a king-class elite to wield it. If I use it, I cannot make use of all of its power. Khan smiled. That is what is so amazing about this spear. It does not require its wielder to be king-class. It can use its max power regardless. If this wasn't the case, I wouldn't have told you it could break that shield. Really? Sleepless Duke lifted the blood demon spear and felt a savage grin pull at her mouth. But when Sleepless Duke put her power into the spear, the throw wasn't that strong. It was far from the effectiveness of a king, and from what she could tell, it was only a little better than Duke level. Khan, are you lying to me? Sleepless Duke looked at Khan angrily. Khan shook his head. Sleepless Duke, you are the leader of the night ghosts. How can you be so naive? There is no power without effort. The blood demon spear might not require you to be a king to use it, but it has its own terms to adhere to. What are these conditions? Sleepless Duke asked quickly. Sacrifice blood to the spear. The higher quality the blood and the more you offer, the stronger it becomes. If the happy face enough blood, it is not too difficult to muster a king-class attack, Khan said. Blood? From where? Sleepless Duke suddenly froze. She knew exactly what he meant. The only blood she could sacrifice was from the night ghosts.
No.
No way. Sleepless Duke gnashed her teeth. Do you have a choice right now? And besides, you only have to sacrifice a few of your people to kill them. Do that, and you can save the majority of your people from Sky Palace's wrath. Otherwise, if Han Sen escapes this planet, death is all that awaits the night ghosts. You know how Sky Palace treats traitors, Khan said grimly. Sleepless Duke clutched the blood demon spear. Looking at the blue shield moving further and further away, her face kept cycling through emotions. Sleepless Duke bellowed to the sky in rage. Many other night ghosts screamed, too. They gave up attacking the blue shield, and instead, they used their claws to cut their own bodies. Blood flowed down like rain. Sleepless Duke swung her blood demon spear in slow arcs. The red pattern on it started to glow, and the rain of blood was drawn towards the spear. When droplets of blood began to land on the spear, they soaked into it, dyeing the weapon a deeper red. It looked like the blood was pooling on the spear's metal surface, but no matter how much blood dripped onto it, not a single smidgen was lost. The red light of the spear became brighter, and the spear's tip shone crimson. That bloody light looked as if it could destroy space. It left shadows in the air. Sleepless Duke roared. She flapped her wings, lifted the blood demon spear, and flew toward the sphere like a waterfall. From the ground, she looked like a red comet flying across the sky. The atmosphere was tinged with the scent of blood, and then she struck the blue shield. The red light exploded against it, but the blue shield did not break. There is not enough power in the spear yet. If you attack too soon, you'll waste the power of the blood you have already amassed. Do you see the blood demon orb on its end? Only when it begins to shine will the max amount of power have been stored inside the spear. Strike when it is bright. Han Sen and the others will all be destroyed in one fell strike, Han said, blinking. There was nothing else Sleepless Duke could do. Looking murderous, she called to the night ghosts again. The night ghosts heard her scream, and they began tearing into their own bodies again, trying to draw enough blood to power up the blood demon spear. The blood demon spear was getting brighter. Blood rained down on the weapon like a storm, and the spear grew stronger and stronger. But the night ghosts were running out of strength. Many had lost so much blood that they fell limply to the ground. Why hasn't the orb lit up yet? Sleepless Duke shouted at Khan. This is a king-class weapon. It isn't that easy to activate. At least half of these night ghosts need to die to trigger its power, Khan said. I cannot let them die. Sleepless Duke roared. There is no way back. We have to kill Han Sen now. If they escape this planet, they will contact Sky Palace. And then, we will all be killed. None of the night ghosts will be spared, Khan said calmly. Sleepless Duke gripped the blood demon spear tightly. She looked as if she was in pain. She looked around at the falling blood, at the night ghosts who had already collapsed. Those night ghosts had eaten many living creatures, and as a result, their will was messed up. But they still followed Sleepless Duke's orders. They were all willing to bleed and bleed. None of them chickened out or took the time to heal themselves. I am going to kill you all. It is because of you that the night ghosts have become like this. Sleepless Duke held the spear as it glowed brighter and brighter. She ran in front of the blue shield, snarling through her bared teeth, and roared at Han Senator. Her pretty face was twisted. Sleepless Duke, you had it coming.
Han Sen smiled.
Han Sen's words filled her with white-hot fury. She looked murderous, and her eyes gleamed red. She began hurrying the night ghosts to sacrifice even more blood. Quick! Hurry! Sleepless Duke watched the blood demon orb, hoping it would light up soon. Otherwise, all the night ghosts would be dead.
Han Sen.
Can your shield block that? That spear's power looks like it is king class. The man said to Han Senator he was still in the process of wrapping up his wounds. The blue shield was obviously very tough, but it looked like thin glass. The man found himself doubting its ability to withstand a king-class attack. It should be fine, Han Sen said. In truth, he wasn't sure. The demon Bug King's Bysema was a mutant king bee soul. That meant it was half-deified. It was a higher level than a king-class strike, so it should have been able to take whatever strike was being prepped for him. But that was all just theory. Han Sen had never tested how much power the demon Bug King's Bysema could take. He didn't know. What does should mean? The man's eyes opened wide as he looked at Han Sen. That means probably.
Han Sen låg head.
Oh my God. The man held his forehead. He looked depressed as he said, I always have the worst luck. Never bet on luck. Our only option here is to throw the dice, though. Do you have a better idea?
Han Sen låg head.
Oh no. It looks like old she is going to die here. The man started to cry. What's your name? Han Sen asked, looking at the man. My name is Shi Mingxiang. You're asking me this now? At a time like this? Think about how we might dodge that scary power and avoid death. Shi Mingxiang said. The blood was a downpour, and the spear was like a dragon. It seemed like the whole of Planet Night Ghost was flooded with a layer of blood. Its smell was everywhere, and even the sky was choked with red clouds. Half of the night ghosts were dead. It was too high of a price to pay for king-class power. Sleepless Duke was full of hatred as she stared at Han Senator. If that horrible stare had been solid, it would have peeled Han Sen's flesh from his bones. The place was in ruin, and many of the night ghosts were dying of blood loss. The ones in the sky were all trembling. It looked as if they could all keel over and perish. Sleepless Duke's eyes were filled with blood tears, but she had no choice but to continue. The sky turned red like hell itself. Boom! The blood demon orb was shining now. The red light lit up the entire blood demon spear. Sleepless Duke looked as if she was holding a red laser. Go to hell. Sleepless Duke spun the spear toward the blue sphere. The shocking red light was coming at Han Senator. It looked as if it could obliterate a galaxy. Han Sen tried to dodge, but the red light was too scary. It looked as if it had locked on, too. The red light was like a volcano that had just erupted. There was nowhere that Han Sen and the others could go to get away from that red light, and even the air was torn apart by its passage. The red light tore through the clouds in the sky. It was like a volcano, erupting without any restraint or signs of ceasing. Sky Palace's future deified elites are now gone. What a shame. Khan looked at the red light in the sky, and then he sighed like it was something genuinely pitiable. But that is how the world should be. Many geniuses die and become nothing more than dust. The ones that can become deified aren't always the strongest. They are the best at surviving. It is a shame your lives are so short. Khan blinked. He looked at the red light that was about to fade. The rest of the night ghosts fell. Then, they had lost too much blood. They looked shaky, and their strength had left them. 10,000 night ghosts had heeded Sleepless Duke's call, but only 4,000 or 5,000 were left alive. They were all low on blood, though, and so they were all much weaker. Sleepless Duke stared at the blood demon's spear in her hands, noting how ordinary the weapon looked after being discharged. She looked over the remaining night ghosts. It would be very difficult to break through Sky Palace's defenses and join the demons now. What follows? At least this nightmare is over. Sleepless Duke sighed. But just as she was going to return the spear to Khan, she froze. Her eyes opened wide, and her body stiffened. She stared up into the sky. When the red afterglow of the attack disappeared completely, Sleepless Duke saw a blue light in the air. It was the same translucent blue shield. Despite being struck with the blood demon spear, the blue shield hadn't broken. Its surface was still clean, and it didn't look like it had been dealt a single speck of damage. Han Sen, Lone Bamboo, and the man were still inside the shield, too, looking totally uninjured. They sat comfortably, with clothes and hair still tidy. Impossible! Khan's eyes opened wide in shock as he stared at the blue shield. He could not believe what his eyes were telling him. The blood demon spear was a king-class weapon, yet it had failed to break through a marquise's shield. It did not make sense to him. Even if the shield was a king-class or deified weapon, Han Sen's limited power should have kept him from using all of its strength. It was the same as Sleepless Duke using the blood demon spear. She had paid an enormous price for her weaker body to cast a king-class power. But Han Sen's shield had held that power the entire time, without any sign of strain or sacrifice. It blocked the blood demon spear without any cost of energy. This was against how xenogeneic weaponry worked. Even defied treasures shouldn't possess power like that. Khan had no way of knowing that Han Sen wasn't using a xenogeneic treasure, of course. Han Sen was using a beast soul. They were items that no other being in the Geno universe could use. They were different things entirely. It looks like we don't have to leave now. Han Sen released the demon bugs by Sema. He pulled out Ghost Teeth Knife and flew back down to Planet Night Ghost on his wings. Lone Bamboo put his jade sword away. His fingers were like swords now, and they created sword airs. He followed Han Sen back down. The blood demon spear's strike had exhausted all the power the night ghosts had possessed. There was no need for them to run away now. When they saw Han Sen and Lone Bamboo coming for Sleepless Duke, the night ghosts wished to stop them. But they had all bled too much, and their powers had decreased. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo were like a pair of tigers leaping into a flock of sheep. The dark purple knife air tore the weakened night ghost bodies apart with teeth powers. Xenogeneic Marquise hunted. Night Ghost. Xenogeneic gene found. Xenogeneic Marquise hunted. Night Ghost. Xenogeneic gene found. Xenogeneic Marquise hunted. Night Ghost. Xenogeneic gene found. Obtain Night Ghost Beast Soul. The bodies of the night ghosts were sliced to pieces by the ghost teeth knife. The killing announcements played over and over in Han Sen's head as he killed scores of night ghosts. Lone Bamboo's 10 fingers were like swords of their own. The sword lights swept down like a net, slaying every night ghost in front of him. Oh no! Sleepless Duke felt dizzy, and she almost fainted. She had sacrificed so much for naught, having failed to hurt Han Sen and Lone Bamboo in the slightest. The night ghosts were done for. She screamed, and with a mind that had no fear of death, she ran for Han Sen. You can handle this? Han Sen flapped his wings and teleported past Sleepless Duke. He was going for Khan, who was in the midst of making his escape. Sleepless Duke wanted to kill them all, but it was still the demon that were behind all this. Han Sen wouldn't let him get off scot-free. Khan saw Han Sen pursuing him, and while he was fast, he wasn't as fast as Han Senator. There was no Marquis alive that was faster than Han Sen. Han Sen, you still have a long way to go. You may have one this time, but you won't be so lucky when next we meet, Khan promised, then pulled out a metal box. He threw it ahead of himself. The metal box was some sort of machine. There were cogwheels spinning inside it. It became a metal peacock near Khan's feet. Go! Khan commanded the metal peacock. It spread its wings, and its tail gleamed with green light. It flew away with the speed of a rocket, and the distance between Khan and Han Sen quickly widened. Running away won't be that easy. Han Sen patted Bauer, and Bauer knew exactly what to do. She picked up her gourd and summoned the Red Cloud. Red Cloud, if you wish to live well, then chase this man. If you don't, I'll lock you up for 500 years, Han Sen said, stepping onto the Red Cloud with Bauer. The Red Cloud shuddered. But then, the back of the Red Cloud released a mist of sorts. It flew off into the sky after Khan and the metal bird. Khan rode the metal peacock through space, feeling absolutely terrible. He hadn't been injured, but the plan with the night ghosts had utterly failed. He would be crushed by his rivals inside Demon. He thought about Han Sen's strange shield that could block the Blood Demon spear. It surprised even Khan. Fortunately, I brought the Duke Xenogeneic Mount Metal Peacock with me. That was too close, Khan thought gladly. Khan looked back at Planet Night Ghost, but then his jaw went slack. Something colorful was coming. When he saw how quickly the Red Cloud was approaching him, it seemed like the Duke-class Metal Peacock had stopped moving entirely. How was he moving so fast? Khan exclaimed, but it was too late. Han Sen had already caught up to him via the Red Cloud. Khan put away the Blood Demon spear, and his eyes started to turn purple. The purple horn on his head burned like red steel, releasing a purple light. Catcha! Catcha! Khan's muscles began to swell, growing rapidly until they burst through his armor. In an instant, the ordinary humanoid body had grown into a terrifying giant. Khan's sinews writhed under his skin like snakes, and his skin turned a weird purple. His hair flowed crazily down his back, almost reaching his feet. Finally, a disturbing demonic presence began to radiate from Khan, like some brutish god hailing from ancient times. Boom! Khan punched Han's Senator Sky Demon powers started to rain down, each possessing the might of a mountain. The demonized giant Khan was so powerful. He was far greater than a Marquis now. In this form, he could probably kill most dukes. With the accuracy of Sky Demon powers, he would be invincible against other Marquises. In this giant demon form, his strikes couldn't be blocked or evaded. He really did seem like an indestructible foe. In terms of might, Khan's giant devil powers were on par with the Red Cloud's speed. But power like that was nothing against Han Senator. He used his Dongxian aura, and in his mind, sequence structures appeared. One sequence structure looked ready to bind Han Sen. Han Sen pulled at that threat, though, and broke it. The speed of the Red Cloud let him dodge Khan's incoming attack as he did. And then, Khan's pupils grew smaller. He hadn't thought that anything could evade the accurate attack of Sky Demon powers. And furthermore, he didn't have time to reel his giant fist back to go defensive. The Red Cloud was like lightning, and it raced towards Khan's neck. Han Sen swung Ghost Teeth knife across it. Catcha! The muscles were cut through by the purple and black knife air, and blood began to fountain from the giant's neck. But the giant was too big, and doing more damage would be difficult. Han Sen's attack had only left a comparatively small wound, given the sheer size of the giant. It was far from a fatal strike. Khan roared. He kept swinging his fists in the vain hope of landing a hit on Han Sen. He was as strong as a marquise could be, but even the precise attacks of Sky Demon powers couldn't land a hit on Han Senator. The red cloud flew around Khan like lightning. Knife airs also started to shine, and every time the purple and black knife air flashed, it left a wound on Khan's body that drained him of even more blood. The demonized giant continued to roar, but his powers could not land on Han Senator. He was like a big, dumb baby as he flailed at the flying red cloud. Why? Why does my Sky Demon power not work? How is this possible? Unwilling to give up, Khan kept attacking like mad. His giant body kept on releasing scary power, breaking the fabric of space. Everything he tried seemed useless, though. Han Sen continued to release knife airs from his seat atop the red cloud. After a few more hits, the red cloud flew away from Khan and hovered directly before him. Khan, when you learned that Lone Bamboo and I had arrived on planet Night Ghost, you had already planned on getting the Night Ghosts to dispose of us. Isn't that correct? Han Sen looked right at Khan as he spoke lightly to him. Khan turned around without saying a word, wishing to flee into the reaches of space. Han Sen just grunted and swung his ghost teeth knife once again. Purple and black knife airs that were thinner than a strand of hair began to appear around Khan's body. In no time at all, they encircled Khan and tightened, binding him. Khan was infuriated and roared in anger. He released his demonic air in a bid to cut the knife silks. However, he had underestimated the effectiveness of the knife silks Han Sen had cast, and even his tremendous power wasn't enough to break them all. His squirming only made the silk dig into his flesh even more. Han Sen kept waving his ghost teeth knife, tightening the knife silks even further. They cut into Khan's demonized giant body and dismembered him in less than a second's time. The chunks of gore and demonic blood swirled in a disgusting cloud. The blood demon spear and metal peacock were released amidst the carnage. Suddenly making up his mind, Han Sen grabbed the blood demon spear and metal peacock. There was also a purple light next to the giant's corpse, which swiftly disappeared into space. What was that? Han Sen frowned. That purple light had been too fast, and Han Sen hadn't been able to see what it was. But he knew that Khan had not truly been killed. It was obvious that Khan was a xenogeneic, and Han Sen hadn't received the announcement for taking him down. Han Sen rummaged through the remains of the giant demon body, and he couldn't find a xenogeneic gene either. That purple thing that escaped just now must have been Khan's xenogeneic gene. He did not know how Khan escaped into space, but regardless, he was gone now. Han Sen wouldn't be able to find the demon. He took the blood demon spear and metal peacock, and then returned to planet Night Ghost. Lone Bamboo had locked Sleepless Duke up. The rebellion of the Night Ghosts was over, and it seemed as if things were calming down. When the teams from Sky Palace arrived, they took Sleepless Duke and the Night Ghost back with them to Sky Palace. Han Sen and Lone Bamboo had halted their betrayal, earning themselves another reward from the Elder. Aside from genofluids and treasures, though, they received another opportunity to go to the Holy House to select a new geno art. However, Han Sen did not have time to practice other genetic techniques. He actually only had a small amount of time left to learn Suppress Evil, so there was no reason for him to go to the Holy House yet. Han Sen still wanted to ask Shi Mengxiang a few questions, but when he returned to planet Night Ghost, Shi Mengxiang was nowhere to be found. However, the man left a communication number on the big stone he had been sitting on. Back in Sky Palace, the leader of Sky Palace wanted to see Han Senator. He stared at Han Sen for a while, and eventually said, "You are not a real student of Sky Palace, and yet you have done so much for us. If you need anything, I will grant any reasonable request." Leader, what do you mean by a reasonable request? Han Sen did not think the leader was being sincere. The leader could turn down any request he wanted to, simply by claiming it was unreasonable. It sounded nice on paper, but it was actually quite stingy. "It means I will try to satisfy what I feel is reasonable," said the Sky Palace leader, squinting his eyes. Han Sen shrugged, thinking that the man was rather manipulative. He wasn't mad, but he wasn't sure how much this offer was really worth. He won't give out too much, but I don't want too little either. What should I ask for, then? Han Sen wondered.
Suddenly, Han Senes ejes breite ned.
It looked as if he knew what he wanted. Sky Palace's leader smiled at Han Sr. Tell me, whatever you need. I see your Master Isha as a genuine student, and you are my student by extension. So, shirk any guilt and ask of me whatever you desire. Leader, I will not ask for much. I recently learned Suppress Evil. The technique is quite amazing, and I would appreciate it if you would help me progress further with it. I would like to learn it faster. Han Sen bowed. Sky Palace leader stared at him in silence. He would never have guessed that Han Sen would request this. This could either be very easy or very hard. The Sky Palace leader had been asked to teach Suppress Evil to Han Sen, but how much would Han Sen be able to learn? There were 11 tiers to Suppress Evil, and many Sky Palace kings had not learned them. The Sky Palace leader couldn't even guess how long it might take to teach Han Sen this. But he was the leader, and Han Sen had just asked to be taught a skill. It would be bad form if he was unable to teach one Geno art to just one student. Sky Palace leader went silent for a bit, and then said, Suppress Evil is a secret skill belonging to Sky Palace. It is complicated. It is not something you can learn over the course of a couple days. That being said, there is a riskier method that would enable you to learn it far faster. Would you like to give it a try? Han Sen frowned. The Sky Palace leader had put the ball back in his court. The man said it was risky, but he did not mention how risky. If Han Sen didn't agree to the offer, then the blame for not accepting the teaching would be at his feet. Of course, if Han Sen agreed, he did not know the dangers he might be walking into. He didn't know if he could handle the risks. Han Sen went silent a little bit, and then he gritted his teeth. I would like to give it a try. Good. You are definitely Isha's student. I have faith in you. Go prepare and look for me on Hidden Path Island. The Sky Palace leader then waved his hand to dismiss Han Sen. Han Sen bowed and departed Sky Palace. On his way, he mulled over why the leader might be sending him to Hidden Path Island. Han Sen knew Hidden Path Island was a restricted section of Sky Palace. Without the leader's permission, no one could go there. As for what the place contained, he did not know. He'd have to find out the next day. But Han Sen did not think the leader would put him through too much harm. At the most, he thought the leader might only make him endure a little bit of suffering. If accepting a little risk could truly allow him to skip through 5 or 6 tiers of Suppress Evil, it'd be well worth it. That Geno art was too complicated. If he learned it like normal, it'd take him a few years to master it. Before going to Hidden Path Island, Han Sen invited Lone Bamboo, Thousand Feather Crane, and the Yun sisters for a meet-up. He also tried to find out more about where he was going. Yun Sushang, hearing the leader would take Han Sen there, was given a shock. Yun Sui immediately said, Hidden Path Island is not a place ordinary people can go to. King-class elites are only permitted there when they are on the cusp of leveling up. That place is extremely dangerous. Many kings have failed to level up there and suffered grievous injuries in consequence. I can't fathom why the leader might want to take you there. The few of them told Han Sen what they knew about Hidden Path Island. They did not know much, and more than anything, it sounded as if it was just a place for kings to level up. The kings that entered would either come out half deified or half dead. It was very dangerous, and none had ever been known to go there without first being king class. Thousand Feather Crane thought and said, We don't have to worry too much, though. Our leader won't want to hurt Han Senator. He obviously has his reasons for bringing Han Sen to such a place. Han Sen thought this, too. If the Sky Palace leader wanted to bring him harm, he wouldn't have to go to this much trouble. The next morning, Han Sen took Bauer with him to Hidden Path Island. Outside the island, he found the Sky Palace leader standing atop a mountain peak. He smiled and waved, as if he was some sort of angel. Greetings. Han Sen set the legless crane down on the mountain. Then, he bowed to the leader. The Sky Palace leader waved his hand. These are the stairs that lead to Hidden Path Cave. Walk these stairs and see how much you can learn from them. Han Sen was shocked. He hesitated, blinking down at the stairs. Leader, are you not going to teach me? Suppress Evil is an unusual art. Even if you were to listen to me lecture you, you wouldn't learn very much. This place is different, however, and you will understand that when you walk these stairs. If you are talented enough, you can level up Suppress Evil quickly. It won't be too difficult to knock down a few tiers this way. The Sky Palace leader smiled at Han Sen. I've heard that this is a place where kings come to level up. I am merely an earl, so I don't think I have what it takes. Han Sen didn't really want to go into that cave. You can back out now if you wish. Sky Palace leader bared his teeth in a grin. Han Sen clenched his jaw and started to descend the steps. The steps were circular, and when he looked down, he could not see the bottom. It was like a spiral that continued down forever into some abyss. The endless spiral staircase was dizzying. Han Sen looked back up and saw the Sky Palace leader smiling at the exit. Han Sen couldn't go back now, though. He lowered his head and kept going. Bauer sat on his shoulders, curiously looking around. There was nothing except for stairs. Han Sen followed the steps that led down into a bottomless pit. He did not know how many stairs he had descended when he came to a stone door. On its frame were a bunch of numbers. 00001. What does that mean? Are there 10,000 doors up ahead? What might be beyond those doors?
Han Sen frov ned.
As Han Sen wondered this to himself, the stone door opened by itself. At the entrance of Hidden Path Cave, there was a woman wearing a black mask. She appeared next to the leader. The leader looked inside the cave and spoke to the black-masked woman. This is your territory. Watch him, and do not allow him to die. You brought him here. This is your responsibility. I do not care about what happens. The black-masked woman said, then entered Hidden Path Cave. The Sky Palace leader smiled when she turned. He stepped onto a cloud and left the island to return to the Sky Palace garden. Han Sen opened the stone door and looked around its frame, already on full alert. On the other side, he found a black vortex, and before he had even the slightest chance to react, a powerful suction tried to yank him inside. With a spike of adrenaline, Han Sen mustered as much power as he could to push himself back away from the door, but ultimately, he could not stave it off. He was pulled into the stone room. Han Sen found himself in a dark, wet cave.
Gualala. Gualala.
The cave echoed with the sound of a chain whipping rock. Then, a large shape began to emerge from the darkness. A monster was approaching, with a Kirin body and green bird wings. It was 10 meters tall and had the head of a tiger. Its glowing green eyes gave Han Sen the chills. The monster was way too scary. Its mere presence was enough to rob Han Sen of breath. Many long black chains perforated its body and were anchored to the stone of the cave. When it was only 10 meters away from Han Sen, those black chains were yanked tight. It couldn't reach Han Sen. Han Sen did not dare be reckless, and so he summoned his Bysema. The fiend was locked up, but it was powerful. Even its breath would be destructive, and Han Sen knew full well his own inability to defeat it in combat. Is Sky Palace failing? Did it send you both here to die? The monster coldly looked at Han Sen. What is this? Sky Palace leader can't mean for me to go up against this thing, surely. Even though it is locked up, there is no way I can slay it, Han Sen thought. He used his Dongxian aura to observe the king-class creature, but he noted that an accurate reading was rendered impossible by the chains. That being said, some of its power was spilling through the suppressing chains. It wasn't completely locked down. Han Sen stopped looking. The king-class creature's green eyes shone like green lanterns. Han Sen hid within his demon bug Bysema as the monster's eyes became brighter. The increasing glow was difficult to look away from, though. Boom! Han Sen felt as if his brain had exploded in his head. Within those lantern-like eyes, Han Sen thought he saw a strange symbol. It didn't look real. That symbol was seared into his brain as if it had been branded by a hot iron, and when the symbol was fully imprinted, it kick-started a storm inside of his mind. It was a real storm, too, as Han Sen felt a wind blowing across his body. In his mind, he saw a soft wind stirring leaves, a sandstorm raging in a desert, and then a sea kicking up a violent tsunami. All these different sorts of wind powers were surging into his brain. Han Sen knew that all of this was taking place inside his imagination, but it still affected him like it was real. The black-masked woman stood outside the stone door, leaning against a wall as she waited. Her eyes were closed, and it almost looked as if she was waiting for something specific to happen. The 72 genes of original killing have been suppressed for 1,000,000 years. Many kings have wanted to learn the original gene spells, but they have always failed. Han Sen has been sent here to endure that original gene spell power. Is that old man insane? Even if Han Sen's will is as strong as a king's, he won't be able to take the mental duress. Then I'll have to deal with it. The woman spoke to herself, eyes closed as if she was dreaming. After a while, the woman opened her eyes and looked surprised. How can he endure the original Gene's spell power? The woman frowned. In a dark world, only one place had light. Under that dim light, a broken palace was visible. In its plaza, a 6-year-old boy was engaged in combat with a strange bird. The little boy kept moving, his shadow flickering over the ground like a real bird's. His shadow occasionally aided him as he fought the bird in the air. Suddenly, the bird and the boy split up. The strange bird laughed and said, "Little flower is talented. If his holy body can become deified, he can make sacred great again. It will still take many years for him to become deified. It isn't easy to raise a holy body to that level," Auntie May said with a roll of her eyes. "But it is almost time for the Geno being scroll, so Little Flower can participate. He can earn Sacred some reputation, and let the old elites know that Sacred is still around. Yes, he must join it." Old Eagle nodded. He looked at the 9-life cat and went on to say, "Old cat, what do you think?" "I think it is time for people to know Sacred has some new blood," Old Cat said coldly. "Good. This is it, then." Old Eagle and the other monsters all looked excited. They all screamed, "Little Flower, you have to earn the number 1 spot for us." Over the next year, Han Sen made sure to enter the hidden path cave each and every day. Every time he was there, he would have to endure the powers of the original Gene kill spells. The creature in the cave was chained and suppressed, but looking into its eyes could activate the original Gene spell power. When Han Sen fought against that power, he learned something. Perhaps it was because he had been blessed by the 10,000 gourds, but he understood all the elements. When he looked at the original Gene kill spell, it was easy for him to understand. But those spells did not ever seem to work on Bauer. She was with him every time he went to the cave, but she appeared to be completely unaffected by the kill spell and its effects. While Han Sen wrestled with the spell in his head, Bauer would just look around curiously. So, over the course of that year, Han Sen split his time between Hidden Path Cave and the White Jade Building, where he continued to absorb Jade Fairy spirits whenever the Jade Air was released. The Jade spirits were an opportunity he couldn't afford to miss. Going to the 7th floor to absorb the Jade Fairy spirits became routine, but after a while, the growth of his Jade Skin's power suddenly accelerated. The godlight gathered on him, and before long, he looked pretty much like a Jade Fairy spirit himself. The fairy-like visage that covered him came out of his own shadow. Aha! Jade Skin has finally leveled up to Marquise. Han Sen was pretty happy about this development, but it was a shame he was still inside the White Jade Tower when it popped. He was extremely eager to try out his new Jade Skin powers as soon as he possibly could. Han Sen learned a lot from the 72 original Gene Kill spells. Suppress Evil was based on the 72 original Gene Kill spells. Han Sen used his Dongxian aura to study the original Gene Kill spells, and through this, his proficiency with Suppress Evil improved rapidly. He reached the 8th tier after just 1 year. His progress was interrupted, however, when the elders gave him another mission. He was tasked with taking on a Marquise Xenogeniac that was wreaking havoc on a business planet belonging to Sky Palace. The job was simple, and Han Sen killed the creature easily. When he returned to Sky Palace, however, his phone rang. It was a call from the number that Shi Mingxiang had given him. Han Sen had called the number before, but no one answered. It looked like Shi Mingxiang had given him the number so he could call Han Sen, and not for Han Sen to call him.
Han Sen ansvarig.
There was no video, only voice. Han Sen remained quiet as the person on the other end began to speak. "Han Sen, it is me." The voice was familiar, but it didn't belong to Shi Mingxiang. It was God's retribution. God's retribution? Han Sen frowned. Now he was certain that Blood Legion had a method of leaving the sanctuaries. "Yes. Listen, I do not have much time. I'm being watched," God's retribution said. "How did you leave the sanctuaries?"
Han Sen asked.
Just hearing the voice wasn't enough for him to be sure that it was God's retribution. Blood Legion has always had a way to leave. We just can't return. God's retribution went on to say, but now is not the time for that. Listen, Do not let anyone know you have practiced the Blood Pulse Sutra. If you do, you may find yourself in trouble. Why? Han Sen asked. It's complicated. Some guy in the Geno universe is coming after Blood Legion members. Fortunately, you have not practiced the Blood Pulse Sutra enough to have blue blood. Just don't tell anyone. If you don't, you won't be found out, God's retribution said. Who has a feud with Blood Legion in the Geno universe? Which higher race is it? Han Sen asked. It is not a higher race. It is something far worse. God's retribution hesitated for a moment, but he still went on to say, you know the creature that called itself a god? The one the 7th team encountered? Han Sen's heart jumped and he said, that guy is in the Geno universe? Yes, but he didn't come here from the sanctuaries like we did. This universe is his home. Remember, don't let anyone know that you've practiced the Blood Pulse Sutra. If you do, you'll find yourself a target. And keep up the ruse that you're a crystallizer. Don't mention to anyone that you're actually a human. That will expose the fact that you're from the sanctuaries. You did well to do that from the start, God's retribution said. What is he? Han Sen asked. I don't know how to explain. All I can say is that he is scarier than a deified elite, and we cannot hope to fight him. He's killed many Blood Legion members. Until recently, we've had no hope of fighting back, God's retribution said. What's different now? Han Sen asked. Super genes, God's retribution said. What does that mean? Those two words caught Han Sen's interest. Only people who have maxed out their super genes in the sanctuaries can compete with a creature like him. That is our only hope. Until you've grown stronger, do not expose the fact that you possess the Blood Pulse Sutra. God's retribution was speaking quickly. If you knew about all this, why didn't you tell me back in the sanctuaries? Han Sen asked. God's retribution said, I told you. We can only leave the sanctuaries. We are unable to return. I only learned about this from the other members upon arrival. Okay, there's no time. I'll contact you again. The conversation was disconnected abruptly. Han Sen put the phone away and thought to himself, if all of this is real, then who is this so-called god? Is he like King Jun? Can he not murder anyone here? Han Sen thought about this for quite a while, but he didn't come to any more conclusions. He hadn't planned on exposing his Blood Pulse Sutra anyway, but after that reminder, he would make doubly sure not to. Whether or not God's retribution was telling the truth, no harm would come from maintaining a low profile. After thinking things over, Han Sen tried to call him back. Just like before, it did not work. Blood Legion members have been able to enter the Geno universe for a very long time. Maybe Human Emperor is around here somewhere, but even so, humans have no fame. They must be hiding themselves away, under great pressure. Han Sen looked grim as he continued talking to himself. Is that god really that powerful, I wonder? After Han Sen reported the results of his quest to Sky Palace, he was granted some vacation days. His Dongxian Sutra and the story of genes still hadn't reached marquees yet. The Dongxian Sutra was slowly growing stronger, but the story of genes had come to a standstill. He wouldn't level that up unless he got some help. Han Sen tried to use the Jade Spirits to boost the story of genes, but it wasn't very effective. Progress was insufferably slow. At that rate, it would take several decades to become a marquise with the story of genes. As Han Sen ransacked his mind for a solution to the problem, Thousand Feather Crane arrived with an order from Sky Palace. The leader has told me to go to the Feather? Han Sen looked at Thousand Feather Crane in disbelief. The Sky Palace leader knew of the grudge that the Feathers had against Han Sen, given his connection with Kong Fei. There was also the Blood Feather Knife incident, which only fanned the flames of their hatred. Yes, the leader wants you to be Sky Palace's envoy to the Feathers. This is good. Have you heard of Holy Heaven's Pool of Rebirth? If you go there as an envoy, you can use it, Thousand Feather Crane said. You mean the pool Angia used to erase everything he had learned? I don't want to be reborn. What's the point in that?
Han Sen frov ned.
The Pool of Rebirth doesn't just reset your body. The powers of rebirth have a unique way of speeding up your leveling. The leader must think your Geno art is ascending too slowly, since you are still only a marquise. Hence, he has presented you with this opportunity to make use of Holy Heaven's Pool of Rebirth. Our contract with the feathers allows us to send 3 people of our choosing to use the pool of rebirth every 10 years. You are one of those selected. The leader takes you as someone quite important, Thousand Feather Crane said, his voice filled with admiration. In that case, I will go to Holy Heaven. Upon hearing that the trip would benefit him, Han Sen did not hesitate. He agreed to become an envoy and travel to Holy Heaven. Given the precarious situation that the feathers had found themselves in, they could not risk offending Sky Palace and bringing harm to Han Sen either. The worst they could do was mocking him. Since he was gaining access to a valuable resource, though, Han Sen was willing to turn a blind eye to their bad behavior. When you return from the feather, it will be time for the Geno being scroll to appear. Will you be entering that competition? You could be the first Earl. Easy? After the question, Thousand Feather Crane smiled. Han Sen had 2 Geno arts that were marquises already, and winning the competition would put him atop the list of all marquises in the universe. It would also highlight the fact he had more than 1 Geno art. I am not interested in boosting my reputation. Han Sen shook his head. Han Sen wasn't the only person going to Holy Heaven as an envoy. A few others, including an elder, were going with him. The others would hold meetings with the feathers to discuss prolonged cooperation between the 2 races. Han Sen had no objective beyond making use of the pool. Han Sen followed the group to Holy Heaven. The leader was the 10th elder, Yun Changkong. Han Sen felt safe in his company. He had a good relationship with the man's daughters and students. If something was to happen, he was certain Yun Changkong would protect him. The people of Sky Palace treated Han Sen nicely, in part due to his great reputation there. He had done many great deeds in service of Sky Palace, so they all liked him. Many gushed compliments. They arrived in Feather Territory safely. Before they went to Holy Heaven, though, a king of the feathers welcomed them. At this point, the feathers depended on their relationship with Sky Palace for survival. Sky Palace's protection was the only thing keeping the other high races from attacking them, so they took their commitment to Sky Palace seriously. When the Feather King looked at Han Sen, however, his expression was filled with distaste. Han Sen couldn't tell if it was due to the events with Kong Fei or the blood feather knife. When Han Sen entered Holy Heaven, all the feathers treated him strangely as well. They were friendly with the other envoys, but they looked at Han Sen with distaste. Han Sen pretended it was nothing. When the feathers learned Han Sen was going to make use of the pool of rebirth, though, they went from being annoyed to being terribly upset. After Ring Feather King showed them the pool, he said, "The pool of rebirth is shut down for maintenance, so you'll have to wait a few days to use it. It will be available to you as soon as it opens again." Han Sen resigned himself to staying in Holy Heaven for a while. Luckily, he was an envoy, so nothing awry transpired. In a meeting room in Holy Heaven, many feather alphas and high-level feathers were talking. The pool of rebirth is the holiest relic of the feathers. How can we allow it to be defiled by Han Sen? A feather elder growled. Yeah, that animal is connected to Kong Fei. He cannot be allowed to use it. Another feather elder agreed angrily. None of the feather leadership were happy about the prospect of Han Sen making use of their pool of rebirth. It's not like we have a choice, though. This is the deal we made with Sky Palace. Using the pool is perfectly within Han Sen's rights, and there is nothing we can do to stop that, Holy Feather King said. Everyone was silent. When the feather lantern darkened, all the feathers dropped a level. Holy Feather King had made use of resources to resecure his rank as a king. It had cost everything Holy Heaven had in its reserves, but they only recovered 30 to 40% of their original power. Without the protection of Sky Palace, Holy Heaven would have ceased to be. If we cannot stop Han Sen from going in, we might as well just totally open it for him, an elder said. Fairy Feather Elder, what do you mean? Everyone looked at the elder in confusion. 3 people are allowed access to the rebirth pool at one time. We have given Sky Palace 3 slots every 10 years. They are only making use of 1 slot, and that slot is given to Han Senator. That means we can send 2 feathers alongside him, Fairy Feather Elder said. Everyone looked at him with confusion, but he went on to say, the pool of rebirth's power is limited. That is why only 3 can go at a time, and those 3 have to be marquises or lower. If a king entered, the power of the pool would only be enough for that one king, and he wouldn't be able to be reborn. If dukes wanted to enter, only 2 dukes could be reborn at a time. You mean, we should send 2 dukes into the pool with Han Sen? So that they could steal whatever power he'd otherwise gain? Holy Feather King asked, while looking straight at Fairy Feather Elder. Fairy Feather Elder said, "We have all used the pool of rebirth, so we can cope with its powers more than outsiders can. With 2 dukes that are stronger than Han Sen, they can surely absorb most of its power. Han Sen will earn a little, but Sky Palace won't notice the trick. This might work, but who is going to take this power?" The elders began to discuss. If a Duke-class person absorbed too much power, they would end up like Angia and become primal. They wouldn't even be a baron, and they'd have to start from scratch again. Not many people wish to end up like Angia, so very few dukes would want to take part in that. Fairy Feather Elder smiled. "Why don't we let the 2 brothers Angela and Anola use it? Aren't they locked up in prison? Will they agree?" An elder asked in shock. "I can persuade them," Fairy Feather said with a look of confidence. "If they can go, that really would be best. Not even 10 Han Sens could fight the 2 of them," the elder stated, almost as if he admired them. On Han Sen's 4th day there, they received news from the Feathers proclaiming that the Pool of Rebirth was open again. It was being prepared for use. Holy Heaven's Pool of Rebirth was one of the most famous pools in the Geno universe. Very few items existed that could help kings level up, but Pool of Rebirth was one of them. The Pool of Rebirth had its flaws, though. The chance of making a king half-deified was low, and there was a great deal of risk in even making an attempt. Even so, many other races coveted the treasure. A king-class feather found Han Sen and led him to the legendary Pool of Rebirth. Despite being called a pool, the item had no water. It was a giant crystal altar, and in the center, there was an angel statue. That statue was white, and its angelic wings were folded forward. It looked like a gentle goddess reaching out to the masses. Merely looking at the statue summoned a flood of emotion, and it felt like a single glance would be enough to absolve a person of all their deathly sorrows and sins. Up to 3 people can use the Pool of Rebirth at the same time. If fewer people enter, much of the power might be wasted. I am positive you know all about this. You do, don't you? Fairy Feather said to Han Sen, who was directly in front of the altar. Yes.
Han Sen nodded.
Before Han Sen came to Holy Heaven as an envoy, the Sky Palace leader had explained what he ought to expect. Han Sen understood what was going to happen. Good. Sky Palace has only sent you here to use it. To keep from wasting power, we will send an additional 2 Marquises to be reborn with you. Is that okay? Fairy Feather Elder asked with a smile. It's fine.
Han Sen nodded.
Angela and Anola. You 2 may enter and be reborn with Han Senator, but of course, make sure to be careful. It would be most uncouth if you were to disrupt our guests' use of the pool. Fairy Feather Elder admonished them loudly. Han Sen had expected this. The Sky Palace leader had sent Han Sen alone so he could absorb all of the pool's power himself, but the Sky Palace leader suspected that the Feathers would send in 2 dukes to fight Han Sen for the majority of the power. Their assumption was mostly correct, except that the Feathers were sending in Marquises instead of dukes.
This surprised Han Sen.
But when the brothers Angela and Anola stepped toward him, he understood why they had been selected. They both looked like feathers, with faces reminiscent of marble statues, and their life forces were Marquise level. But just feeling their presence, Han Sen knew immediately that something was amiss. He did not believe for 1 second that they were truly Marquises, plain and simple. They were more impressive than any duke that Han Sen had yet met, and they looked as if they had a great disdain for any being other than themselves. Not even most nobles carried themselves with such haughty confidence. Were they the top dukes here? Were they just reduced to marquises when the lantern went out? Han Sen guessed to himself. Han Sen was half correct. Angela and Anola had been kings. They broke the law and were sent to jail, where they had been for the last few centuries. They were tortured so much that their level dropped down from king to duke. And then, the feather lantern went out and all the feathers across the universe lost an entire level. Those 2 had to suffer a drop from duke to marquise. Because they had been in jail, no resources were made available to help them recover. So, they had to remain marquises. Fairy Feather had somehow convinced the 2 brothers to fight for the power against Han's senator. Their power might have been marquise, but their inner core was king. Their talents far exceeded those of an ordinary marquise. In the past few days, they were healed enough to become dukes again. If they successfully absorbed the rebirthing power, there was every chance they could become kings again. Using those two to fight against Han Sen was better than employing an average duke to do the same. Against the cruel power of the brothers, Fairy Feather thought Han Sen would gain nothing. But he told them they had to allow Han Sen to gain some smidgen of power, so Sky Palace wouldn't be able to claim foul play. The pool of rebirth is going to open. Please, proceed to the altar, a feather butler proclaimed. The altar was surprisingly large. Han Sen went to stand near the angel statue, where he would wait for the pool of rebirth to open. Angela and Anola stood on either side of the angel statue, with Han Sen in the middle. They didn't look at Han Sen once. They just coldly stood where they were. Angela and Anola did not take Han Sen for a threat. They used to be kings, so no matter how popular Han Sen might have been, there was no reason for them to pay him any attention, they believed. Fairy Feather and the others were now all anticipating a good show. Only the envoys from Sky Palace watched the pool of rebirth curiously. They were keen to see how much Han Sen could gain from it. When Yun Changkong saw Angela and Anola, his eyes squinted. Those two brothers were in holy heaven, and very few knew about them. They had been locked up for centuries, so all memory of them should have faded. Yun Changkong still knew a thing or two, though. Yun Changkong did not know the two brothers, but he was in charge of the Cloudsmoke building. It was a department that collected intelligence on races throughout the Geno universe. So, he was familiar with famous feathers across the ages. The feathers had called two strange marquises to fight with Han Sen. So Yun Changkong knew there was something abnormal going on. There's more to these guys than it seems, Yun Changkong thought. He was trying to guess who those two brothers were. Yun Changkong found it very hard to believe that the feathers would pick two marquises to fight Han Sen fairly. The feathers despised Kong Fei, and Han Sen had received Kong Fei's deified feather. There was also the blood feather knife incident. There was no way the feathers were willing to let Han Sen take their rebirthing powers. Yun Changkong could not recall having heard of the two brothers, but before long, the pool of rebirth opened. The angel statue started to spew water, and the angelic wings began to unfurl. Light glowed from the altar, and when it did, water fountained up from the statue. It turned into a crystal pillar that shot right up into the sky. Han Sen reached out his hand to touch the energy that looked like water. It now made sense that this place was called the Pool of Rebirth, as the energy it possessed was very thick and very much like liquid. When he touched that energy, he felt as if his body was being overwhelmed by a sudden surge of hormones. All of his cells throbbed, as if they were on the precipice of exploding. As quickly as he could, Han Sen used the story of genes to absorb the liquid energy. Angela and Anola began absorbing that liquid energy, too. This, however, wasn't the energy of rebirth. It was just a substance from the pool of rebirth that would ready them for the main course. Earlier, the angel statue's wings were folded forward in a way that cloaked its body from view. Even the statue's arms had been hidden. Now that the wings were open, though, the angel statue was revealed to be holding a stone vase. The energy held within that stone vase was the reason they had come. After a few seconds, the liquid energy flowed out of the vase, spreading as it came. Pop. Han Sen refined the liquid energy, and as he did, he heard a bubble pop from inside the vase. Shortly after, something white came out of the vase. Before Han Sen could see what it was exactly, Angela and Anola began glowing with white light. They turned into big, angel-like figures themselves, and they shrouded their own bodies in the plush comfort of their wings. Han Sen watched for a little while before he got a clear view of the white thing that had come out of the vase. Okay, he thought, that's just weird. The object was around the size of a hand, and when he looked closer, he saw that it was an egg with angel wings. It looked rather cute, actually. At first, it flew in circles around the angel statue. Before long, it seemed to notice the power of Angela and Anola, and as a result, it flew towards Angela. Han Sen knew that thing was the rebirthing power he had come for. Luckily, the Sky Palace leader had told him how to take the power for himself. The rebirthing power was strange, and it was not something Han Sen could take through force. He needed to attract it towards him with his own life force. Normally, feathers were the best at attracting and absorbing the rebirthing power. But the Sky Palace leader taught Han Sen a method of doing this himself. Following the instructions he'd been given, he started off by casting the story of genes. I wonder if this will actually work? Han Sen thought to himself. The method the Sky Palace leader had given him was simple. It was so simple that Han Sen doubted it. It seemed too good to be true. Han Sen started off by casting the story of genes. Then, a godlight appeared and took the shape of a ring. It was like a nice little halo, sculpted to the size of Han Sen's head. In some ways, it looked like a mirror was perched directly above him. When Han Sen created that ring, the rebirthing power swerved away from Angela and turned around. It flapped its wings and went towards Han Sen's ring instead. Seeing the rebirthing power heading for Han Sen, Fairy Feather and the others remained calm. They knew Han Sen would be tricky to deal with. It was because they knew this that they specifically sought out Angela and Anola to deal with him. Seeing the rebirthing power flying to Han Sen, Angela and Anola looked at each other. Anola nodded, and then his angel shadow turned gold. Boom! Anola took one step forward, with his giant angel shadow appearing gold. He opened his arms and wings. In a gesture that looked like he was welcoming the morning glory of the sky, he radiated thousands of beams of golden light like a holy angel. Everyone could see that Anola had leveled up to become a duke. His life force was strong, and he could attract the rebirthing power more strongly. Yun Changkong, seeing Andola's gold angel, thought, Judgment Angel Light. That is a forbidden technique of the feather. Not many can learn it. I remember there were two brothers that learned this technique a few centuries ago. Are they? Yun Changkong looked at Anola and Angela, and his expression turned gloomy. He thought to himself, if they really are the brothers, then Han Sen is in danger. Even the ring skill the leader has taught him won't be enough to overcome these two brothers. Yun Changkong was now able to effectively guess what scheme had been concocted and why things were going the way they were. Andola's gold angel appeared, and the rebirthing power going into Han Sen stopped. The egg's wings flapped in confusion as it bobbed back and forth, unsure where it should go. As this occurred, there was a popping sound. Another winged egg emerged from the vase, and it behaved just like the other one, as well. It was also wondering where it should go. Han Sen frowned. He was using the ring skill that the Sky Palace leader had taught him, but it didn't seem to be enough to attract the rebirthing power. Anola kept strengthening his gold angel light, but he was still engaged in overcoming the allure of Han Sen's ring. Neither of them could attract the rebirthing power exclusively to themselves. Fairy Feather and the others were glad that they had called on the brothers Angela and Anola. Ordinary dukes would have definitely lost to Han Senator when they saw Anola struggling to win. They realized how powerful the attraction of the ring was to the rebirthing power. But as dire as things might have seemed for the pair, they weren't worried, for Angela hadn't fully entered the contest yet. If the brothers cast their powers at the same time, the power unleashed would surely result in Han Sen losing. Yun Changkong frowned. The Sky Palace leader's ring was very strong. Han Sen was only an earl with the story of genes, and yet he could fight against Anola, who was a duke. That meant the ring was very attractive to the rebirthing power. But there was still Angela left to deal with, and that meant the chances of Han Sen actually winning were slim to none. While Han Sen and Anola fought, many more winged eggs appeared out of the vase and became stuck between the two. In no time, a bunch of rebirthing powers were flying around in indecision. Angela stepped up beside Anola and touched his head. His own angel shadow turned gold. Angela had absorbed enough liquid energy to become a duke. Angela then began to channel his power into Anola. His gold angel light was getting weaker, while Andola's gold angel light was getting brighter and brighter. The balance between the gold angel and the ring was broken. The rebirthing power started to flap their little wings and head for the gold angels. F***CK. That's a powerful technique. Han Sen frowned. He thought with Sky Palace leader's help and teachings, he'd be able to get the rebirthing powers with ease. But of course, as usual, things weren't working out as he might have expected them to. If Han Sen was only dealing with one of the brothers, the ring skill the leader had taught him might have actually stood a chance. But now that the two of them had combined their strength to combat Han Sen, he had no hope of competing. Seeing the rebirthing powers head for Anola, Han Sen racked his mind for a way in which he could turn the tables. The ring skill had been created by the Sky Palace leader specifically to attract the rebirthing power. Han Sen had been counting on it to work, and now that it was proving ineffective, he had no clue what he might do. Attempting to attract the rebirthing power with his own life force was useless. His life force was weaker than Andola's, not to mention that the contest was too on. I can't worry too much about it. Han Sen gritted his teeth and then charged up a jade skin light. With it, he flew towards the rebirthing power. Han Sen wanted to see if the Marquis's freezing godlight power could freeze the rebirthing power and stall it. When Anola and Angela saw Han Sen trying to grab the winged eggs, they did not even move. They just laughed with disdain. The rebirthing power could not be taken by force. Even a king-class person could not use force to grab them. Fairy Feather Elder smiled and spoke to Yun Changkong. Elder Yun, young people have no patience. Did you not tell him that he cannot take the rebirthing powers by force? Ah, it's a good thing that young people are reckless. That fire and passion should be maintained. They should strive for everything they can while they have the time to try, Yun Changkong said coldly. Yun Changkong thought Han Sen was doing the right thing, even if he wasn't successful. People who sat down like cabbages and didn't even try were the absolute worst. Fighting until the end, no matter how low the probability of success, that was what everyone should do. So, while all the feathers looked at Han Sen as if he was some sort of clown, Yun Changkong was of the firm belief that Han Sen was doing what was right. He admired his behavior. And it was true that Han Sen would never slow down and stop doing his best. No matter how trying the task was, he just never gave in. It might seem easy to never stop fighting, but very few could actually go on as he did. The Jade Skin Godlight hit a rebirthing power, but the freezing Godlight had no effect. It was like hitting a shadow, as the power shot right through its body. It really doesn't work. Han Sen pretty much expected this result, so it wasn't as if he was disappointed. Anola and Angela, the two brothers, looked even more disdainful. Anola smirked. Rebirthing powers cannot be taken by force. You have to wait for them to come and enter your body. Didn't you know that? The Feather Elders and elites were laughing their socks off. Their eyes were full of condescension as Han Sen's hands grabbed nothing. They looked at him like he was an absolute buffoon. Kong Fei had put out the lantern of the feathers, so there was no one that the feathers hated more. In addition, Kong Fei had given deified feathers to Han Sen and Stay Up Late. To the feathers, that meant Han Sen and Stay Up Late were Kong Fei's dogs. If Han Sen had not belonged to Sky Palace, he would have never been given access to this pool. They would have hunted him down and killed him. You cannot force this. What an ignorant youth. Fairy Feather Elder stroked his beard as he spoke. The pool of rebirth is a sacred item belonging to the feather, so of course it would help us, another elder said. We should remind them not to take too much. They need to let Han Sen have some, as he is a guest, an elder sneered. They were all so merry, and they practically radiated arrogance. The Sky Palace envoys frowned, but this was part of the deal between the feathers and Sky Palace. It was not like the feathers were slaves. The feathers had more options than just Sky Palace, but Sky Palace had made them the best offer. That was why the feather allied with Sky Palace. The feathers were controlled by Sky Palace, but they still governed their own affairs. If Sky Palace completely controlled the feathers, there would have been no reason to send envoys to the feathers to discuss the future. The envoys of Sky Palace were not fond of the feathers' behavior, but they couldn't make too much of an issue over it. It wouldn't reflect well on Sky Palace. Yun Changkong did not move. He just looked at Han Senator. He was on his own now, and there was no one there that could help him. Teaching Han Sen the ring technique had been a good idea. Even against two ordinary dukes, Han Sen could have taken most of the rebirthing power. No one could have known that the feathers would field such powerful competitors. Anola and Angela were twins, and they had Judgment Angel Light. They could transfer power to one another. That was something ordinary dukes could not accomplish. When their life forces joined as one, not even a genuine king could beat them. That was because they were kings at one point too. Han Sen hadn't expected his jade skin light to work, so he used it mostly as a distraction. As the observers were focused on his futile attempts to capture the winged eggs, Han Sen got close enough to the statue to open the demon bug king by Sima. Han Sen could no longer afford to hold back. They had to see which side was stronger. It'd be okay if he failed, but if he succeeded, Han Sen was not going to leave them a single ounce of rebirthing power. He was taking everything for himself. BZZD. A blue glass light appeared around Han Sen, encasing all the rebirthing powers and the angel statue within. Stupid. Rebirthing power cannot be blocked by force, either. You cannot use strength to trap it. Enola laughed darkly. Fairy Feather smiled and said, "It is good that young people work hard, but doing this is both reckless and foolish." Pang, pang, pang. Fairy Feather Elder and the other feathers looked on in disbelief. The rebirthing powers that were flying toward Angela and Enola smacked into the blue shield. They could not penetrate the wall of light, and they ricocheted off one after another like meatballs bouncing off a plate.
Impossible.
How can the rebirthing power be stopped like that? Enola shouted at the top of his lungs. Angela was simply stunned into silence. Fairy Feather Elder and the kings stared with gaping jaws. They had no reaction to give, for what they saw was absolutely insane. It was well and truly baffling. The rebirthing powers had been blocked. Never in their wildest nightmares had they thought something like this could happen. Not even king-class elites could do such a thing. But the fact of the matter was plain to see. This was happening. The rebirthing powers were being blocked by the blue light wielded by Han Senator, and because of the blue shield's ability to contain the rebirthing powers, the winged eggs could no longer detect the life force of the brothers. With no alternatives available to them, they all chose to drift towards Han Sen. Seeing that, Yun Changkong smiled. He was genuinely surprised by what he was witnessing, but pleasantly so. He knew about Han Sen possessing some sort of a shield treasure, due to the reports stating he had used it against the Night Ghosts during the wild chain of events that transpired on planet Night Ghost. Yun Changkong hadn't seen it in person before, though. He only had second-hand accounts to go on. He did not know the powers were this effective, but above all, he did not know it could be used to block the passage of the rebirthing powers. The envoys in Sky Palace were in sheer delight, as one might expect. Han Sen was representing Sky Palace, too, so it had made them incredibly frustrated to see Han Sen being relentlessly mocked. Han Sen's not bad, but then again, that's why he hails from Sky Palace. I thought rebirthing powers were powerful, but now they're being shielded so easily? It looks like the tales about them were incorrect, and they were just fanciful exaggerations. Fairy Feather Elder's face had turned an abhorrent shade of green. He couldn't speak under the crush of the painful shock he was experiencing. He had no clue what powers might have fueled Han Sen's shield to do what it was doing. It boggled his mind that it was able to block the rebirthing powers. Before they could even hope to form an understanding, though, the rebirthing powers were directly in front of Han's Senator. Rebirthing power hit Han Sen's Geno armor and melted into it. It shone like a holy light in his armor, making him glow with a holy aura. But, many rebirthing powers hit the spell armor like snow, making the armor glow. When every rebirthing power entered his system, Han Sen felt as if he was given a shot of adrenaline. His body was so alive, and power surged into each and every cell. It really did feel as if he was going to be reborn. Han Sen cast the story of genes to absorb those powers and evolve his spell armor. The spell armor was by far the hardest to level up. He gathered as much power as he could right now, because he wouldn't be afforded a second opportunity. Outside the shield, Angela and Enola flared their power as strongly as they could. But try as they might, everything they did was useless. The demon bug by Sima blocked everything. The rebirthing powers could not detect them outside the shield, so they had no interest in going anywhere other than to Han Sen.
Han Sen.
You are cheating. Put away your shield. Fairy Feather Elder shouted. Yun Changkong laughed and said, Fairy Feather, the rebirthing powers go for the one whose abilities they prefer. Random chance at a factor too, of course, but this is not cheating. If Han Sen is cheating in your books, then why did you get those two to lower their level from king to enter this competition? Fairy Feather Elder's face turned red. He realized with frustration that Yun Changkong knew the true identity of the brothers. The rebirthing powers are distributed by the pool of rebirth. What do you think? Yun Changkong looked at Fairy Feather Elder and smiled. Well, I can only suppose that you are right. These matters should not be trifled with by us, and they should be exclusively sorted out by the individuals currently occupying the pool of rebirth. This will all depend on their abilities and their abilities alone. We are only here as spectators and nothing more. Fairy Feather coughed and spoke at high volume. Angela and Anola heard him, though, and they understood what he really meant. Anola punched the blue shield. When Anola punched, the giant gold angel shadow moved with him to punch the shield, too. The gold fist struck the blue shield like a giant, smacking a crystal bowl. The shide looked like weak glass, but when the gold angel fist came into contact with it, it was the gold light that shattered. Andola's fist bounced off, and the blue light was wholly intact. Andola's face warped into something horrid. He gathered up more power and kept punching alongside his gold angel. The gold light shattered, but the shield remained untouched. Han Sen was inside it, calmly absorbing the rebirthing powers. His spell armor was becoming brighter and brighter. The Duke powers were unable to break the blue shield, and this shocked the Feather Nobles. Anola clenched his jaw. Then, his body started to vibrate with power. His angel wings spread open wide, while an orb of light began to mass between his hands. That gold light was like a vortex swirling in his hands. The gold light became brighter and brighter, until it looked like lightning in his hands. Judgment Angel Light was a forbidden skill because practicing the art was very dangerous. It was so strong that there was a fair chance of it damaging the caster. It was the strongest attack Geno art, but not even the feathers dared use it. Anola and Angela were talented enough to bring their proficiency with it up to king class. They could be the strongest kings out of all the feathers. Although they were only dukes now, the Judgment Angel Light they were summoning would still be incredibly powerful. Boom! When that gold light reached its max size, Anola and his gold angel shoved it forward. The light looked as if it could destroy a galaxy as it streaked toward the shield. Pang! The gold light shattered like glass. The blue shield, on the other hand, was totally fine. Against its blue surface, the terrifying Judgment Angel Light was no more than a delicate glass arrow. Many Feather Elders and Dukes were shocked. Angela roared and gave his big Judgment Angel Light to Anola. Anola looked scary as he cast the second Judgment Angel Light. He gathered up the strength of two people. Boom! A thick gold light came against the blue shield like a light of judgment that could destroy Earth. But when the light came against the blue shield, it was the gold that broke again. Nothing happened to the shield. It was quite spooky. Everyone stared at the shield in awe. The strongest secret skill of the feathers had been used by the brothers Angela and Anola, and it had proven useless. I refuse to believe that this shield of his cannot be broken. Anola fumed. He continued using his Judgment Angel Light to attack the blue shield. Han Sen stood where he was, allowing the rebirthing powers to cleanse him. He looked as blissful as if a pretty woman was giving him an excellent massage. He was very relaxed. Fairy Feather Elder and the others wanted to rip Han Sen's ugly face off. But the brothers' Judgment Angel Light could not even make the blue shield tremble, let alone make a dent. Han Sen's shield had encased the entire angel statue. The rebirthing powers that came flowing out of the vase all headed towards Han Senator. There was nothing the brothers Angela and Anola could do. Rebirthing powers flowed into the spell armor continuously. The symbols across the spell armor brightened, shrouding Han Sen in a holy light. He was like a sun within the demon bug by Sema. Angela and Anola continued to attack the demon bug by Sema, but nothing they tried worked. The shield did not even shake. When Fairy Feather Elder and the others saw the rebirthing powers go into Han Sen, their hearts bled. No matter how much they hated Han Sen, there was little they could do. They could only watch the heartrending show. When Han Sen refused to remove the shield, it became apparent that he wanted all the power for himself. Fairy Feather shouted furiously, "Take it! Take it! Yeah, so much rebirthing power will push you into going primal. You won't be able to cope, and you'll have to restart from the beginning." There really was so much rebirthing power. There was enough there to satisfy the rebirthing needs of two dukes. What he was thinking was correct. Fairy Feather wasn't the only one thinking this either. Most feathers were of the same mind. Han Sen had absorbed so much rebirthing powers, it had likely reset his geno armaments and turned the dial back to 0. But as more and more power came gushing into the spell armor, what they expected didn't seem to occur. The spell armor just continued to glow and nothing more. Half of the rebirthing powers had emerged now, and all of them had been taken by Han's senator. Not even a duke should have been able to withstand that amount of energy. He should have gone primal by now. But Han Sen still stood calmly in the light, with nothing distressing occurring. Angela and Anola ceased attacking. They just stood there, watching Han Sen absorb every rebirthing power. They looked extremely awkward. The pool of rebirth had already started, so they would have to wait for all of this to be over before they could leave the altar. The whole race of the feathers were embarrassed. They did not speak, and some of them had to slink away. The Sky Palace envoys, on the other hand, spoke merrily amongst themselves. They spoke about how much rebirthing power Han Sen might need to level up. As time went by, fewer and fewer winged eggs were being released from the vase. Han Sen's spell armor was getting even brighter, but it did not look like it was going to become a marquise. Han Sen thought that much power would level up his spell armor, but as the rebirthing power trickled off, the armor didn't seem ready to reach a higher tier. Oh no! So much energy and yet spell still isn't going to become a marquise. Han Sen felt depressed. The feathers were in even more shock than Han Sen about this, though. Han Sen was going to absorb all of that rebirthing power, and yet he wasn't going to level up. His geno armament wasn't reborn either. It was hard to imagine how he had managed to absorb so much power without being overwhelmed. When the last rebirthing power exited the vase, the liquid energy ceased its discharge too. Then, the altar started to dim. Han Sen absorbed the last rebirthing power, and spell looked like an armor built from the sun. It was so bright you could hardly look at it. But despite that, it had not reached Marquis class. Han Sen knew there was no hope of accomplishing that here. And now he realized just how difficult it was to level up the story of genes. That geno art required a mountain of treasure. Poor people could never hope to learn it. Even rich people would go bankrupt trying to meet its demands. The pool of rebirth stopped running, and the crystal pillar became dim. Han Sen had been the one to absorb every rebirthing power, and the brothers had been denied a single one. So what if he took all that power? After all that power absorption, he still cannot become a marquise. No matter how hard he tries, he'll never become deified. I doubt he'll even reach king class. He is just a waste of resources. Words like these were exactly how the feathers tried to comfort themselves. But even so, they could not deny how surprising the demon bug by Sema had been. Even with the brothers combining their judgment angel light, they could not make the shield rattle. They wondered if a king-class elite could hope to break it. What treasure was that shield? Why was it so strong? It looks like only kings can break that shield. I cannot believe this treasure fell into the hands of an earl. I bet Knife Queen or Sky Palace leader lent it to him. How could an earl like him obtain such a powerful treasure? With this treasure, he could do anything in this universe. It's a shame this treasure is in the hands of scum. No matter how much the feathers complained, they could not change the facts of the matter. They could not obtain a single ounce of power from that pool of rebirth session. Sky Palace had only occupied one slot of the 3, and in doing so, claimed every single rebirthing power. Sky Palace had 2 more spots to use, and if they sent someone else like Han Sen, that would mean they'd be getting the equivalent of 9 sessions instead of the 3 they were allocated. But despite their bitterness, there was nothing the feathers could do about it. They had to gnash their teeth and swallow their pride. The envoys continued their discussions with Holy Heaven, so Han Sen did not see the point in hanging around now. He left Holy Heaven to return to Sky Palace where he could absorb the Jade Spirits. The story of genes was hopeless to level up, and not even Han Sen was confident in whether it could one day become deified. It took an extreme amount of power just to become marquise, so God knew how much it would take to become deified. Han Sen sat in an airship on his way back to Sky Palace. When the ship dropped out of hyperspeed, Han Sen was suddenly overwhelmed by a sense of extreme worry and nervousness. Without hesitation, Han Sen summoned his demon bug by Sima to protect himself. Then, there was a light. Everything was consumed by that sudden scary power that was faster than the speed of sound. The demon bug by Sima made a squeaky noise within the light. It sounded like glass that was about to crack, which told him his shield might have finally met its match. Gah! Who wants to kill me this time? Han Sen thought as he sweated bullets. He cast his Blood Pulse Sutra and opened a space portal which he could use to return to the sanctuaries. He'd be safe there. This power, whatever it was not something he could fight against. Even if the demon bug by Sima could withstand it, Han Sen couldn't even discern where the attack was coming from. If a deified elite was coming for him, the demon bug by Sima wouldn't be able to help him. With the adrenaline pumping through him, the light seemed to last forever. In reality, though, the entire attack took less than a single second. News quickly circulated that a big, scary light had incinerated Han Sen's airship within the space of a single second. There was not even dust left to hover around in the vacuum, and Han Sen himself was gone. Needless to say, the entirety of Sky Palace was pretty angry about what had taken place. They eagerly wanted to find out where the attack had come from. The relationship between Sky Palace and the Feathers became tense and sour due to the Feathers being the likeliest perpetrator. There was still the chance another faction had tried to frame the already suspicious Feathers, of course, but that wasn't always everyone's first thought. And unfortunately, due to the entire ship being obliterated, along with the complete disappearance of Han Sen, most people believed he had been killed. They did not think he could have survived such a strike. Sky Palace and Narrow Moon conducted a joint investigation to find who behind the attack, but there wasn't a single lead to follow up on. They couldn't even find out who cast those powers. They only knew that the power that had attacked the spaceship must have been unleashed by either a half-deified or a fully-fledged deified elite. It couldn't have been done by a high-tech weapon, because weapons like that needed to be set up and prepared. Its presence would have left evidence, too. Items like that would have been found as soon as the investigative teams entered the system. There were no clues or leads for the investigators to pick up, but at least that told them one thing. It told them that it was a person or a creature that was behind the attack. It would take a thinking mind to avoid leaving evidence. Han Sen had run back to the sanctuaries, of course. He did not know if there was an enemy guarding the point he jumped, so he wasn't in a rush to return. He stayed home for a while before going back to the Geno universe. When he teleported through, Han Sen wore the four-faced, eight-armed golden Buddha soul armor. He also hid his presence, so no one could discern that he was actually Han Sen. Han Sen, after appearing in space, quickly scanned the area. There were no enemies in the nearby vicinity. It made him feel greatly relieved, and after identifying the nearest planets, he flew in the direction of one. The hyperspeed checkpoint in space had been destroyed with the ship, so there wouldn't be any more ships coming through for quite some time. Fortunately, there was a planet close by where he could book passage. Due to the small size of the planet, it wasn't very civilized. In the Geno universe, this planet was more like a station. There used to be a hyperspace checkpoint there, but it was hardly used anymore. There wasn't a ship that could take Han Sen to Sky Palace. Han Sen booked passage to the Fire Lotus system, hoping he could find a ship there that would take him to Sky Palace. Fire Lotus system was a territory that belonged to the Thousand Treasures, but unfortunately, it wasn't the same group that ran Stay Up Late's Wanjia Treasury. Fire Lotus system was just a border system that the Thousand Treasures happened to own. When Han Sen arrived at the Fire Lotus system, he looked for another ship that might take him to Sky Palace. But then, something strange appeared in the midst of space. The emptiness of space opened like a pair of curtains, revealing a weird scroll that hung in the black. In a mind-boggling way that seemed to defy physics itself, the scroll was visible from every planet in the Geno universe as it unfurled. And as it opened, names appeared across its surface. Those names were shining. Even from a billion light-years away, they could be clearly seen. Elites from races all across the universe were represented. Some of these names had been on the scroll for centuries, but they were still known and feared throughout the universe. The scroll continued to unroll, with more and more names becoming visible. From kings to barons, there was at least 10,000 names written for each tier. Every name was the best of their class 100 years ago. It was the greatest moment in those elites' lives. First king, Zhang Xiandao, Sky, Second King, Dragon 1, Dragon. Everyone could feel the glory exuded by those names. When the scroll was completely unfurled, all the names shone as if they'd do so forever, and they brightened up the stars. Boom! Space itself was shaking, and the light of the scroll shattered like dust. The scroll in the sky became empty, and then a few words appeared again. First King, Zhang Xiandao, Sky. A shadow appeared on the surface of the bronze scroll. The shadow took the shape of an angelic-looking man. The image grew in size, becoming clearer and more detailed. This was the man who had defeated everyone to reach the top. Blurg. Han Sen almost choked in surprise. That first person on the Geno being scroll, Zhang Xiandao, was the Sky Palace leader. The shadows that appeared behind him displayed the history of his battles across the centuries. Everyone was now able to admire his heroic fights. But then it started showing the following names on the list, and when it reached the 10th king, it showed no more. And then, it moved on to show the number 1 duke. The top 10 of every level appeared on the bronze scroll. The way they fought made people very excited, even those who weren't interested in combat. The shadowed images left the inhabitants of the Geno universe in a state of awe as they cycled through elite after elite. Then, they became dust across the scroll, and when all was said and done, nothing remained of them. The names disappeared from the lists, leaving only empty brackets. All the names from a century ago were gone, including the names of the number 1 king, number 1 duke, and number 1 marquis. All that remained were the empty ranks now. Boom! All the lists cracked, breaking apart to reveal an image that seemed to tear its way through space itself. A picture was forming, one that showcased a mountain, water, stars, suns, and moons. There were seas and clouds, deserts and green fields. This sweeping canvas had expanded across the whole sky. It cycled through the images, focusing on each one in turn. The images flashed by quickly enough to make an observer dizzy. Countless stars began to fall from the painting. To Han Sen's surprise, one of the stars fell directly before his feet. When the glow diminished, he saw that a plain white sheet of paper had landed by his feet. Han Sen glanced around at the others that were nearby. Every person around him had received a similar piece of paper, and many were already writing down their name and race. Some of the more primal creatures that lacked the ability to write would simply press their paws and claws down on the parchment to register. But whether you wrote down your name or pressed your hand against the papers soon regained their glow and flew back into the sky, returning to the bronze scroll. Across countless systems, many of those same star-like lights were racing off into space like an inverse meteor shower. They were all headed for the same bronze scroll. Han Sen glanced at the paper in front of him and started to turn away. But suddenly, he felt himself compelled to write down his name as Dollar and list his race as human. As soon as Han finished writing and lifted his fingers off the paper, the registration sheet flew up into the sky and into the scroll. Well, if that god wants to look for a human, I will let him look. If he makes a move, then we will all be able to see what he tries. Han Sen's mind drifted back to the conversation he had with God's retribution. While Han Sen was still mulling all of this over, his paper landed on the scroll with a strange light. Han Sen felt his body twist and distort in a familiar fashion. It reminded him of how it felt to use a teleporter. When the process was over and his footing was stable again, he found himself standing in the middle of a grassy field. It looks like I'm inside the Geno being scroll. Han Sen looked around. He landed in the precise spot his sheet of paper did. Han Sen continued looking around until he saw a giant monster rushing towards him. It was a Marquis Xenogeniac. The dinosaur-like monster came rumbling forward, but Han Sen did not move. When the monster was in front of him, he just put his hand out and touched the horn protruding from the beast's nose. Boom! The monster stopped like it had hit a wall. Han Sen then punched the monster, sending it flying. The monster's body tore a trench into the ground as it skidded backwards, and it heaved up blood while it squirmed around. It quickly submitted to death. Xenogeniac Marquis hunted. Black steel beast. Xenogeniac gene found. It died that easily? Han Sen was shocked. When his jade skin leveled up to Marquis, Han Sen's body and power became far stronger. It helped a whole lot more than the elevation of his blood pulse sutra did. Many marquises saw this take place, and when they did, their faces changed. They quickly summoned their white papers and tore them up. Their bodies all twisted and vanished as they departed the Geno-being scroll. Han Sen summoned his own paper, looking down at his signature. Now he knew that if he destroyed the paper, he'd lose and be sent out of the scroll. Han Sen would never concede, of course. He commanded the paper to fly, and it hovered next to him like a fairy. People could see the name dollar and the race human. And Han Sen could also see the other marquises displaying their own papers in a similar fashion. No matter how hard or dirty a fight became, a paper couldn't be affected by anyone other than its owner. Only the owner could decide whether or not they wanted to abandon the scroll. Han Sen was walking on a grassy plain. He had heard that when contestants first entered the Geno-being scroll, a bloodbath would ensue. The 10,000 left alive would appear on the list, and then a harder fight would follow to determine final ranking. In the first fight, staying alive and in the scroll were the only things that mattered. If he lasted until there were only 10,000 people left, he'd succeed. Because different races had different powers, some of them were choosing to hide themselves. Han Sen did not plan on hiding, though. He wanted every creature and God to know there was a human named Dollar in the Geno universe. A dragon with wings and dragon horns walked toward Han Senator. He looked at Han Sen's paper and smiled. Human? Never heard of it. Dragon? Han Sen asked the dragon. Dragon 39. You are unlucky to encounter me, Dragon 39 said, raising his head. His masculine body was pumped full of hormones. Not everyone joined the Geno-being scroll fight, of course. Not many dragons had decided to participate this time around. Dragon 19 and Dragon 9 were the only other dragons who had decided to join. Many dragon elders were watching this fight, though. Dragon 19 and Dragon 9 had come with Dragon 39, because Dragon 39 was the weakest dragon to participate in the Geno-being scroll. Although he was the weakest of the Marquise dragons, to an outsider, any pure dragon was obscenely strong. He was only weak compared to the other pure dragons. What is a human? I have never heard of it. Kill him quick and do not waste time. Dragon 9 smiled. Dragon 39 seemed to hear what he said, and so he roared. Then, he threw a punch at Han Senator. A presence surged before his fist like a raging dragon. Han Sen did not dodge, though. He just threw a punch to meet Dragon 39's. He only used pure, plain strength, though. He didn't even bother summoning a godlight. Ah, you're trying to fight a dragon with pure power? This human might be cute, but he is also naive. Before Dragon 9 finished speaking, his face went blank.